Good evening, my friends. This is Pastor Joseph Bryant Jr., Director of PUSHTECH2020. Welcome to our 5th annual PUSHTECH2020 Summit. Another year of excitement, another year of impact, and another year we get to share as we gather the family together to do something great. You know, it's been 5 years we've been having this conference, and this year, obviously, it's a whole lot different than it has been in the past. Normally, we'd be gathered somewhere in the Bay Area. We'd have some of our meetings in Silicon Valley with our tech partners. We'd have meetings in some hotels, maybe a community center, maybe some schools, churches, all around the Bay Area where we would normally have our PUSHTECH2020 event that is managed by our Silicon Valley Rainbow Push office. This is a different year, family. It really is. 2020 is different for a lot of reasons, but we've made it this far. We've made it through all the challenges, all the ups and all the downs. We've made it here, and we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary of PUSHTECH2020. Now, let me just say that even though PUSHTECH2020 is 5 years old this year, the event is 5 years old, the work isn't 5 years old. Reverend Jesse Jackson began this work in the late 1990s. He gathered with Silicon Valley leaders in the 90s to talk about this evolving reality of technology and the digital world. As a matter of fact, Bloomberg ran a very powerful article that said Jesse Jackson's next target, Silicon Valley. And what was he doing? What was he saying? What was he talking about? Access to opportunity. The same things he's talked about for now 60 years. Justice, equality, fairness, opening doors for all of us to be able to walk through. And we are here not only to celebrate 5 years of this journey with PUSHTECH, along with Reverend Jackson and the phenomenal leadership of Mr. Butch Wing, but we also look back over a 60-year legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson and how he's now integrated the tech world into his social justice initiatives. And so here we are, PUSHTECH2020 Summit. The year is 2020. Here we are once again, all because of our phenomenal leader. Let's take a few looks back at the journey of these 5 years. Just a few snapshots from conferences, events, activities, shareholder meetings, conversations with CEOs, interviews, but he laid the foundation, y'all. Yes, he did. Reverend Jesse Jackson, like no other, here he is.
How did you come to engage with the tech industry?
Well, these are patterns of cultural, political exclusion. Mm-hmm. When cotton was the biggest industry, we were locked out of that except on the bottom. You know, when we moved into the industrial age, we were locked out of that. For those who have the effort and excellence means a lot. Inheritance and access means more. Mm-hmm. So we just kind of locked out. But whenever we found opportunities and growth, we fought for the right of equal protection under the law and equal access. And so in our development, it was my conclusion that this is the fastest growing industry in the whole world. You know, 7 billion people on earth, 3 billion smartphones, maybe 2 billion on Facebook and the like. And so we have to make the adjustment. So when we researched Silicon Valley, the top 20 companies, 189 board members, 36 white females, 3 African American, 1 Latino. The C-suites, 300 in the C-suites, 6 African Americans, 3 Latino. In the employment down around 1 to 2% as a pattern. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of investing in startups, almost 0. Mm-hmm. So here were companies were profiting off of our investment and our interest. When the new store opens, we're lined up sitting out all night long as others do, but locked out of access to capital, industry, technology, and deal flow. And the case we made when we went to these various meetings was we represent value added, not the cost of doing business. We represent those who've locked us. They're locking out market, money, talent, location, growth, and creativity. So we made a case. Mm-hmm. The growth is in the private sector. And just as we vote with our ballots, we also vote with our dollars. The use of our dollar as a lever for change must be more fully employed. The shareholders meeting is a great place to raise very basic concerns. You become part owner of the company. We have concerns about boards of directors. Companies like eBay and Google in the Valley, no blacks or Latinos on their boards. We didn't know how good baseball could be till everybody could play. We don't know how good high tech can be till everybody can play and can function. I mean, to be buyers and sellers and managing pension funds and mergers, acquisitions, IPOs. I mean, this is the business of America. We will be persistent until it happens. We have a significant office here in Silicon Valley, and we are going to expand upon it here and around the country because high tech and speed are the themes of our time.
Welcome to the 5th Annual PUSHTECH2020 Summit Conference. I want to express my thanks to Reverend Joseph Bryant, who's still working making this conference happen. This is a real world in which computers determine time of day, whether it's Microsoft in the Northwest, Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, Google, the like. I had an experience this week. We went out to a Ford Motor Assembly plant in Chicago. And they make AA meters and make Ford products. To see them make a car from screw to screw is interesting because you could work there in a suit and tie. It's all computer. No hammers, nails, and greasy big arms. It's a computer. I'm trying to get our children to learn computer science, those in jail. If you're a pretrial detention, if you learned you have the right to vote, you get precincts inside the jail. Give them a sense of they matter, that they can do something with their lives. So computers in the jail to teach children apps and codes and programming. 1,000 churches and teach 1,000 churches, at least 50 youth a semester learning how to work computers. That's 50,000 a year, more and more. We need you to be involved with us. I'm excited about this conference this year. Joe Brown will give you more details about the various workshops because we have outstanding people involved in the workshop. More than that, I can tell you what it means to me to talk to you today. I've just visited the Ford Motor Assembly Plant and looking to make these major cars. Industry driven by computers. They're making cars, making softwares, chemistry, and computers. As outlined, space flights. It's all about computer. So I want to thank you for being a part of Push 2020 Tech Summit Conference. Let's talk about it and let's do something about it next week. God bless you and keep up alive.
The Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, a man I met in the 60s when we were both young Democrats, black young Democrats. Jesse Jackson went on with Martin Luther King's blessings to become part of the King team. And when King lost his life in 1968, it was Jesse Jackson who thereafter created an organization called PUSH. And Jesse saw that there was a technological revolution about to take place in this nation. And soon thereafter, PUSH became PUSH with its tech entity, which is what we are celebrating. I say to you that Jesse Jackson is up there with all of the giants. And the giants obviously includes Martin Luther King Jr., it includes John Lewis, it includes Thurgood Marshall, it includes Oprah Winfrey. Nobody as important as Jackson should be left out of that collection of giants. I congratulate you, Reverend Jackson, and I say, push tech. Keep it up. That means there's a future for all of us.
Thank you so much, Mayor Willie Brown. None other like the mayor, y'all, none other. And you all have been friends so long. It's just great to see both of you, Reverend Jackson and Mayor Brown, still making such a difference, such an impact all of these 60 years of the journey. And so here we are standing on the shoulders of great men like you all. And so we're grateful. And I want you all that are enjoying this experience tonight, you know, a part of this conference, we're here for you, even though it's virtual, even though we're not sitting together. I want you to engage with us. Go ahead and send some messages and make sure that you're in the chat with us and make sure that you're sending things out through social media and watching and enjoying, sharing it with others, have a little watch party, because we want to enjoy this great and impactful conference that we've put together for you. We've got some incredible people talking about vision, values, and votes. We're talking about your voice. We're talking about how you make a difference, not just those that we have on the panel, but your voice matters. We're talking about an election year. We're talking about something that's happening in a few weeks. And even after this event tonight, I want you to hang out with us. We're going to have a watch party because there's a debate that's happening right after us. And so as we engage in our digital inclusion conversation, we want to make sure vision, voices, and of course, votes always matter. And that's why I think it's significant to have people like Willie Brown talking about his journey, because he was a part of Reverend Jackson's campaigns in those election years in the 80s. And now I'm just privileged to present this wonderful one-on-one conversation about computer science, about the digital divide. It's so significant that these incredible women who have been on the journey for a long time, both in their various silos of life and impact, both as political leaders and voices of change, both of whom were at our very first PUSHTECH2020 conference, and they're still with us. And we're just so grateful for Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Impact Strategies CEO Angela Rye. These phenomenal women are going to bless us with a one-on-one conversation about the digital divide, about the impact, about 2020, about where we are and where we need to go. Here they are, Congresswoman Lee and Angela Rye.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Rye, and today it is my great honor and privilege to talk to one of my favorite human beings, not just favorite members of Congress, but truly one of my most favorite human beings to talk to. She inspires so many of us every single day. Congresswoman Barbara Lee represents Oakland, California. She likes to call it Wakanda. I'm surprised she didn't salute y'all just yet. But she is also a former Congressional Black Caucus chair. She sits on the prestigious Appropriations and Budget Committees. She is in congressional leadership and she's an all-around boss. And one of my favorite things that she leads on is ensuring that we bridge the digital divide and ensure computer science for all. And that is to ensure that Black folks are competitive on all levels. Congresswoman, you also chair the CBC's, co-chair the CBC's Tech Diversity Tech 2020 Task Force. And since I've known you, you've been ensuring that Black people are represented in every single industry, all throughout the political spectrum. And so I just thank you for your work, for your leadership and dedication. Like every time I talk to you, I'm like, how did she do it? I gotta keep up. How are you?
Good, good, good. You're keeping up quite well, Angela. And I want to just thank you for giving me a chance to be with you because it's so important. And we have very few, especially Black women who've been on the inside, who are now on the outside, and who can interpret both what we do on the inside and how important people on the outside are to our agenda. And so you're one of those few who really understand that dynamic because it's pretty complex. So we miss you on the Hill, but we're glad you're where you are.
I can tell you I miss you every single day, but I'm always grateful when we have the opportunity to just share a text message or two. So thank you for all you do, Congresswoman. You know I love you dearly. So let's jump into this. I don't think, just for background, that a lot of people understand how much work you've done on the Appropriations Committee to ensure that computer science for all isn't just an ideal, it's something that you want funded. So I want you to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done to ensure that computer science for all becomes a reality for all of us.
Thank you very much, Anna, because this is another one of those instances where the behind the scenes work is really important. In the Appropriations Committee, oftentimes our work really isn't translated where people understand what we do. So just a step back as it relates to President Obama and how we miss him. But what happened was this: he put forth an idea about making sure that we had equity and close the gaps in technology, right? And that started, of course, with education. And so he proposed an idea called computer science for all. So I worked with the White House and we put together legislation calling for a $250 million investment in computer science for all. And that was for technology education, K through 12, targeted toward low-income communities, communities of color, and girls. And so, of course, the bill, which is still a freestanding bill, we're trying to build more co-sponsors for it because that's the name of the game in Washington. But in the meantime, because that's an authorizing bill. So I decided as an appropriator to figure out how we could get the money to do what we're still trying to do through legislation. And we've had to work in a bipartisan way. And so on the Appropriations Committee, every year we've been chipping away. I think maybe the first year I got 25 million to go to the Department of Ed, then 50 million. I think we're maybe up to about 150 million now, writing it into the bill, directing the Department of Education within certain accounts to make sure these funds are available for the purpose that we just stated. So it's slow, but it's coming, and it's so important because now with COVID upon us, we're seeing how our children are being even further left behind because so many, even in my own district, in the Golden State of California, don't have access to broadband in low-income communities in the African American and Latinx community. And it's outrageous that we have to scramble now to find access and scrape to get tech companies and other donors to put broadband in and computer and Wi-Fi hookups and technology and computers and everything that's required for our kids to learn. So this is a timely discussion, and just know right now we're seeing why President Obama said, let's do this. We're seeing the impact of what's happening now with our kids.
Yeah, it's such a powerful point and a salient one. You know, Congresswoman Lee, I keep being just amazed at how much 2020 really is the year of perfect vision. But I got to tell you, this is not what I wanted to see, right? But when I mean it is exposing everything that I heard you all talk about so much when I was on Capitol Hill, the things that I know you were writing in letters, not just on diversity and in hiring and in retention, but also in so many other ways. When we talk about systemic oppression and racism, this year really has exposed that in ways for people who were blind to the facts, right? And so one of those facts is, or one of those facts are the fact that there are kids who are at home right now, Congresswoman, to your point, who don't have access to broadband, and therefore, given this new COVID-19 reality, are struggling to just keep up, right, with their schooling, making sure that they can turn in their assignments, that their Wi-Fi will even just work for that. So when you talk about bridging the digital divide, really what you've done through this appropriations process is start to pave that way, because what we know is you can't bridge the digital divide without cash and equity in that cash structure, right? So
That's exactly it.
Talk a little bit more about the other things that are immediate needs to ensure that kids at home can do their assignments, can just do their homework, can keep up, and can finally bridge that digital divide in COVID.
Well, first we have to see this in a broad sense, and that the HEROES Act, which we're trying to get passed, we've got to make sure kids don't get evicted with their families because they can't pay the rent or pay the mortgage, okay? So that's the first thing. We have to make sure the kids have enough to eat, because so many of our families have lost their jobs or have been laid off. So SNAP benefits is extremely important. So we have in our communities a pandemic upon a pandemic, upon a pandemic. And so we have to do all of this at the same time. And like you said, the inequities now have been exposed. Healthcare disparities, the virus is hitting African Americans and Latinx and AAPI families, individuals in way disproportionate rates than white families. So we got to deal with that also. So we've got a lot to do. And part of what we have to do during this period also is to help train teachers to teach computer science, and with all of the implications that requires, because, you know, a lot of our teachers, they've had to scramble during this period just to raise enough money to help not only their families, but children access the whole distant learning. And so then they have to, you know, go back to school in many respects virtually. So part of what we want to do is make sure that teachers don't have to worry about the high quality learning materials that they need, that they're trained to be able to do this with students, and to help reduce, with this overall will help reduce the equity gap. But it's a big issue now, because access to technology has these social impacts that would make kids who don't have access fall further behind.
Yeah.
And so we've got to see this in terms of everything that they need, because if we just did broadband and kids are out in the streets because of the evictions, you know, because we haven't been able to get the Republicans to agree to put another moratorium on evictions, then that's all for naught. And so we have to, this is a moment to look at how we work in an intersectional way to make sure that we take care of the support that's necessary while COVID is upon us.
It's so interesting too, because I know where you all have been pushing for the Senate Republicans to pass the HEROES Act for some time. But not only that, they found the time to try to confirm this woman, Amy Coney Barrett, but I digress. Let me go to my next digital divide question.
Well, that's important, because you know what? November 10th, the Supreme Court hears the hearing for, here's the Affordable Care Act. And we know that Donald Trump is trying to dismantle healthcare for millions of people. And you know who's going to lose their healthcare. You know, we have these huge disparities still. It's going to be people of color, low-income people living on the edge, and they're going to take away healthcare for so many people. Millions of people are going to lose it. So it's all related. Children, everybody's going to lose their healthcare if they fall within the category of what Donald Trump is trying to do.
And Ms. Lee, you talked already about a little bit about the difference between authorizing language and appropriating language on the Hill, the things that you ensure get money from the appropriations process. Can you talk a little bit about the concerns you may have about where Congress has placed its priorities in terms of what it will agree to fund versus what it's not, and where you still see some major opportunities for you to step up and for the CBC to step up to really say, no, hold up, these are the things that you have to get done to ensure real parity and access for my community?
Sure. Well, of course, housing. We have to increase the funding, which we've done, quite frankly, for unsheltered populations. We have to do that. We found the funding for also additional funds for our Second Chance Act. You know, many years ago, Danny Davis authorized it, and I've been appropriating more funds for formerly incarcerated individuals to make sure that they have a second chance, that they have job training, access to housing, and everything they need so that they don't recidivate and go back into jail. And one part of that we're trying to do again on appropriations is to say, we've got to lift these bans. You know, now formerly incarcerated individuals aren't eligible for Pell Grants in many states, unless state passes it, Section 8, SNAP benefits, housing through public housing, Section 8, ineligible for that. Ineligible for so much of what we pass. So in appropriations, we have to say no funds will be appropriated unless you allow for formerly incarcerated individuals to receive Pell Grants. You know, that's how in appropriations you do this. You say, we're going to deny funding unless you do the following. And so there are many areas we're working on appropriations. I mean, when you look at the Office of Minority Health, for example, this administration and the Office of Health Disparities, they came in with zero funding. So as an appropriator, we have to say, no, look at the health disparities in our communities. We need funding to fund these offices of minority health, the Office of Racial Disparities, and everything that makes sure that we address the healthcare of African Americans and people of color. So we had to fund community health centers and more money. But this administration, so what happens is they bring a budget to us. We look at it. I mean, Betsy DeVos in this Department of Education budget, for example, zero to offices of civil rights for children. And you know, our kids need protections in terms of non-discrimination laws. And now schools have been resegregated, and we know that, and that's in large part because of how this administration is doing this. So we have to say no funds are going to be available to implement the rules that you've been trying to make that would enhance more segregation in schools. So we do a lot of that, and a lot of the appropriator's job is to make sure that we deny funds to agencies that are going to do bad things to our community, or that we appropriate money that are going to do good things, that are going to crack those chains of systemic racism. And that's how I've always viewed my job is this going to help move racial equity forward, or is it going to set us back?
Wow. That's so good, because and for all of you at home listening, I will tell you that I have witnessed firsthand that is how Congresswoman Lee rolls, like in every single aspect, again, from politics at the DCCC to conventions to the DNC to tech companies, like that is absolutely the case. And Congresswoman Lee, I have to ask you this too about bridging the digital divide. We've talked about the Hill and what its role is, but let's also take a minute to talk about corporations' roles. How can you bridge a digital divide if you're not hiring people from those communities, right? To ensure that there's representation. And when it comes to whether it's philanthropic initiatives in communities from those businesses, or there's a private-public partnership that could exist with those businesses and the government to close that gap. What are some of the things that you know must be true in terms of just hiring practices?
Well, Angela, thanks for that. And you know, my district is right next door to Silicon Valley. I'm in Alameda County. Silicon Valley is primarily Santa Clara County. Now, this goes back to the 90s. I had many constituents who were applying for jobs in the 90s in Silicon Valley who were denied job opportunities. And I can remember, this was during the Bill Clinton administration. Black engineers had to file a lawsuit because of that. And again, 40% of these jobs are even non-tech jobs. So there is systemic racism in the private sector. And when G.K. Butterfield took over the Congressional Black Caucus, I went to him and said, look, we need to set up a strategy to address discrimination and racial equity in the tech sector, on the board, C-suites, employment, as well as in the contracts and the suppliers and what have you. And so he embraced this, and we, along with, and I have to salute and thank Reverend Jesse Jackson and Butch Wing, and now Reverend Bryant, for their tremendous leadership, because we actually went to Reverend Jackson, and we've been working together on the CBC Tech 2020 with Rainbow Push 2020 for many years. We've been aligned, but we never could have done this without Reverend Jackson's partnership and help and leading the way. So what we did was set up our, and I think you were there when we set this up, where we had developed our principles, what we wanted to do in terms of the tech sector. We have put together Tech 2020. We visited Silicon Valley, New York, everywhere where the tech sector is big. And we've looked at what has taken place, asked them to release their numbers. Some don't release their EEO reports, some do. And we found maybe 2 to 4, 5% of the workforce was African American. So we said, no, we're gonna put some real sticks. We've done carrots, now sticks into this, because a lot of them have federal contracts. A lot of them have to be accountable to members of Congress. And so we've been fighting, and in some companies fighting, and some we've had a decent partnership. And some have developed offices of diversity. Some have established unconscious bias training, but in that unconscious bias training, which surfaces in managers their racist, in many ways, attitudes that they may or may not know they have, the follow-up in terms of what do you do about that has not occurred in a lot of companies. So we're on to them about the follow-up. Most of the companies don't have goals and timetables. You know, like traditionally you'd say, okay, given the population and given what's reasonable, we need to have X amount of African Americans in these positions. Most of the companies won't do that, but we've made some progress. Some have now up to 7 or 8%. Some companies are better than others. But I have to tell you one story. One of these companies we went to, in terms of the boards, 0 African Americans, right? And they said, oh yeah, you know, we understand that next board opening we have, we're going to consider, you know, African Americans for this board. Okay, we returned. They had 2 board openings, and not one of those openings did they appoint an African American, not one. So we have to stay on them constantly about this, constantly. And we have to make sure that the content, because when you look at all of the misinformation and disinformation and who they hire to develop content for messages, if you don't have African Americans there who are looking to say, this may be the Russians doing this because I know about this about the Black community, or this may be divisive, or this may be not factual, or this may be sowing seeds of dissension. Let's look at it. If you don't have African Americans there within the those sections that hire people to look at content, you know, we get messed up each time. And so it's behooves them to be fair, and all we're asking for is equity and fairness and justice, and hire people and their market. I mean, look at the Black community and how much we use social media. Yes. And so they can't get away with not hiring us and not contracting with us and not putting us on the boards and in the C-suites, because we're going to create more of a digital divide if they don't do the right thing. So it's a slow process, I have to tell you. And being right next door, I hear from my constituents all the time. And Angela, I just have to say one thing. Sometimes this is something I really get upset about. They'll say, well, if you send us some qualified Black people, we'll take a look. I said, well, you've never said send you some qualified white people or qualified anybody else. You know, I mean, it's kind of like really subtle, how they think. And it's an industry that is a young industry. I mean, these are young people who started. And so we've got to make sure that the old thinking and the old ways, like hiring your friends from Harvard, for example, or hiring your friends you went to school with at Yale or Princeton, knowing that, you may or may not have a pool of African Americans to select from or to hire. Right. And finally, let me just say, we've been working with the tech sector to create pipelines. And so we have our HBCUs involved with some of the tech companies, and some of them have really good pipeline programs, but they're not to scale. They're not comparable to what they can do. And then west of the Mississippi, we have no HBCUs. And so we're trying to get them to, we do have PBIs, which are predominantly Black institutions, trying to get them to understand that they need to develop strategies, not only with HBCUs, which they've got to do and take to scale, but they've got to do it with predominantly Black institutions also. Otherwise, young people on the West Coast, west of the Mississippi, if they don't attend an HBCU, they're not part of the pipeline kind of programs that these tech sectors companies establish.
Wow. And one of the things that just kind of stands out in my mind, I remember when you all were standing up Tech 2020, CBC Tech 2020, and of course, Rainbow Push's version of it, there were supposed to be some major accomplishments by this year. How do you feel like the tech industry as a whole is doing?
Well, not well, because by 2020, approximately, 77% of US jobs require computer skills. And by 2020, I believe we would have 17 or 18% vacancies. And we want those vacancies filled by people of color and people who couldn't fill those vacancies. So it's slow. And you can see progress on each one of our principles and each one of our strategies, but it's too slow. And coming from, again, right next door to Silicon Valley, it's much too slow for me. And then now we have on top of that, the social and economic impact of gentrification. Yes. Because in my district and in San Francisco, we know that they, and people can live where they want to live, fine. But we know how important, how expensive it is. Now to live in my district, I mean, low income in the Bay Area is like 120,000. That's low income, right? And so it's crazy. That's amazing. So you can't, so people who are working in the tech sector have naturally moved to areas that they can afford, which is the San Francisco and Oakland, which unfortunately displaces people because they can purchase properties that are a 2-bedroom house for $600,000, whereas the average Black person family in my district makes $45,000 a year. So you can see what happens. So I've asked the tech sector, you come up with social and economic impact strategies where you cite. I think Microsoft in Seattle did a pretty good job where they provided a loan fund for people who wanted to stay in their homes when they moved into certain neighborhoods. And so I think it's upon the tech sector to look at the social impacts as it relates to everything, but especially housing, and do something to mitigate against that, whether it's setting up a loan fund where people can purchase homes, whether it's augmenting the rent, when they know that these people are going to be kicked out, they've been living there for 30 years. So I think that's another layer that we have to deal with, because otherwise the unintended consequence is gentrification.
Congresswoman, how did you kind of take in, I know that, of course, the geographic connection to the tech sector, but for some people at home who are like, number one, she's busy enough in Congress. How does she have time to take on the tech sector too? And some others may be like, well, this is beyond the scope of, congressional duties. How are you managing all of this? And really, what is your why? Like, I think it's so important for people to understand that you really are motivated by mission-based work. And you see this as an inherent part of what you do in Congress, not as an add-on or separate.
Yeah, thanks, Angela, for that. And all members of the Black Caucus know that our lives and our agenda is about justice, right? Wherever you see justice. And so, and we do constituent services. I mean, this is part of constituent services, really, making sure that any sector is responsive to our constituents for the people. And so as member of Congress, look, these tech companies get federal resources. They get tax credits. They get all kinds of benefits. And so if they get your tax dollars, then it's my job to make sure that they treat people fairly and equitably. So this is not in addition to our congressional job. I don't care if it's the tech sector. I don't care what sector it is. Black people and all Black members of Congress, they get in to whatever they're doing and making sure that racial equity is part of their agenda. It's not just me, it's everybody in the CBC. And so Tech 2020 for me is just a manifestation of the continuation of my movement work or my activism work as an advocate, really. And, you know, that's what we do.
Yeah. I just wanted people at home to hear. But I also wonder too, you said earlier that the tech sector, you feel like it's moving, but it's moving slow. How would you compare it or contrast it to other experiences you've had with other industries? Is it on par with other industries? Are they a little better? Are they a lot worse? What do you say?
I say that they have been a lot worse.
Ooh.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Why?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They've been a lot worse because of the culture of the tech sector is so insular. Okay. And you don't have except in some companies, once they hire African Americans, then they begin to understand the necessity for equity programs and inclusion. But the culture is so tight.
Yeah.
And so, and let me tell you, out here, for example, if someone is hired, an African American hired from another state, comes here to California, I've talked to many African American employees who may stay for 6 months because it's so hostile. There are no support services, no support systems in place. And so I'm really proud of a lot of the African Americans now. They're organizing affinity groups and different types of organizations within the companies for support, but also to keep their voices loud and clear on what needs to happen. And so you have a lot of revolving door in many ways with African American employees, because once they get there, it's like a hard place to be. And so that's one thing. And so let me just tell you, and so I think it's such a unique industry that it's been probably, from what I've seen, and I used to have a business and I did affirmative action plans for companies. And then we had an 8-factor analysis, which would kind of show you how many people you needed to hire, how many African Americans by such and such a date. And also I've seen a lot of these industries either resist or move forward. Now in this space, especially in California, there has not been really any incentives to move like in the past. And so I think now, though, the role of the CBC is so important because they know that they have to come to a Congresswoman Maxine Waters, for example, or a Congresswoman Annie Bernice Johnson, who chairs Science and Technology. They have to come to myself on Appropriations Committee. So they have to come. And so we have to have this partnership because, you know, that's part of politics. That's what it is. And so one industry, though, that I'm hoping doesn't follow this track is the cannabis industry, Angela, because, you know, I co-chair the Cannabis Caucus, and less than 1% of the licenses right now are granted to African Americans. So we have a huge opportunity right now to keep that industry from becoming like the tech sector or other sectors. So we have to be on the front end of that right now. So I'm doing that also, but that's part of my congressional work.
How many caucuses, Congresswoman Lee, like not like CBC and KPAC, but like the special interest or issue-based caucuses are you a part of?
Oh God, a lot. But the ones I co-chair, I co-chair the Cannabis Caucus, the Sudan Caucus. Also, I chair the Majority Leaders Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity, you know, and I co-chair the CBC's Task Force on Poverty. So, you know, and all these are really active task forces and caucuses. Some are more active than others. I'm a member of the Ethiopian Caucus. I'm a member of the you know, a lot of different country caucuses, which sometimes require a lot, sometimes don't. But these are really consistent, like daily efforts that my staff and myself put in on these. So
we don't ever know where she sleeps, but here
there,
when she sleeps. Yeah, like I don't know. I just don't know how you do it. But the other thing is going back to this summer. We saw a huge kind of uprising in response because of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And Congresswoman, again, you've been fighting, you know, racial injustice and police violence for decades. But lo and behold, here we were, people's eyes were opened and they had finally seen what Black folks have been saying for years, because not only was it caught on camera, but it was caught on camera and they were caught at home. because of quarantine and state shelter in place orders. How do you think corporation kind of social justice responses were? And do you think that they've quieted down too much since then?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, what we saw was what we all know and what we've been fighting against for 401 years, since the first enslaved Africans were brought here to these shores. And so we know systemic racism and we know it exists. I think, and a lot of my colleagues and constituents called and wondered, why are we seeing this? What's going on with Black people dying so much from COVID or Mr. Floyd being killed? I'm saying, don't you guys understand what systemic racism is? And a lot of people didn't until now. And so I think what's important is that now we have that moment. And so the movement has to continue. The movement for Black Lives Matter. We cannot let up. We have to still be in the streets and turn that movement power into political power through voter registration drives. And everybody, please vote November 3rd, get your ballot in, make your plan, vote early, but it's got to be a decisive victory. So I think that movement, though, is extremely important to hold these companies accountable. So some came forward, and I was glad to see that, with funding for organizations. Some came forward and started talking about Black Lives Matter, whereas before, you look at the sports teams, you look at, so now Black Lives Matter and should be in everybody's mind, at least. Let's hope that they've internalized it. But let's hope that not only are these sessions, because so many people want to talk about it now, non-Black people, okay, but it's like, okay, do you support reparations? HR 40, do you support repairing the damage? If you do, then get us co-sponsors from your congressperson to get on. Do you support Barbara Lee's bill, HR 100, calling for a Truth, Racial Healing Transformation Commission? 40-some countries have established them after genocides and slavery and crimes against humanity. This country's never had its day of reckoning in terms of a truth-telling moment about systemic racism and the effects of the Middle Passage. So if they're for real, Angela, if they're for real, they will get behind systemic change and support us in what we're doing on big, bold measures, such as HR 40, HR 100. They need to get with the George Floyd policing and justice and policing bill and get that Senate to move. And so I think these corporations, because they're so influential with Republicans, they need to talk to their Republicans and say, you guys, you really, say, not that they're saying that, but if you, but these companies, if they really believe in what they're saying, they should at least lobby on behalf of Black Lives Matter and look at the bills and come to the Hill. Get your members of Congress to support the Black Caucus and its agenda. Otherwise, you're just talking.
Yeah. Man, I was thinking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission measure that you put forward. And I'm just curious, Ms. Lee, when you see, one, the diversity battle that you all have experienced yourselves as elected officials in the House, not having enough CBC members now, I think at 55.
Yeah, we could get to 60 plus.
Which
November
is
3rd.
Right. You're like, which brings me back to my original point, which is spot on, but also knowing how it's been for you all to carry that water, not just on a partisan basis, but you've also had some educating to do with white colleagues in the same caucus. What are some things you can offer in terms of encouragement to people who may be a part of a minority where there aren't enough of them? Maybe there's not an employee resource group at their jobs, at their tech companies, but what are some of the things they can do, even if they are in the minority, to ensure that they are advocating on behalf of Black people for our interests, both in the company and in the community?
Yeah, and I think it's important, I'll go back because, I got involved in politics with Shirley Chisholm. She said, once you get on the inside, she said, you can't go along to get along, but you got to go along. You got to get on the inside and change the rules of the game because those rules weren't made for you or I. And so I think it's important, that once we have these opportunities, and there are ways to navigate it because people have their jobs, and I respect and understand that, but there are ways that you navigate now that you've broken in. How do you do this? Because you know the culture, you know the personalities, you know the system. How do you do this for others. And I think the role of Black employees is very productive. And I know many Black employees in these companies are doing just that. And so, the style, you may have to do it within the corporate culture, which is fine, but you can't just say, I got in and that's it. And also understand the nature of the political system, and that CBC members, whether you have a CBC rep or not, are there to help you in a way that is respectful. And we've never blown anyone's cover. We've never not allowed for Black employees to do what's necessary or keep their confidence. And they need to know we support them in whatever they want to do.
That's good.
And can do.
I'm thinking when you said that about a moment that I always go back to, where I was sitting with Kamala and she told me it was right after the 2016 election. So you can only imagine how I was. But she said to me, I want you to remember that in this work, you're never alone. And what I hear you saying is that same thing to people who you may not be working with them in the company, but you're working with them to ensure that their experience is that much better. And that's
exactly it. And that's why you have a Black caucus. And that's why we really want you to understand this is inside outside.
That's right.
And we work together. That's how you move forward and progress. We all are in the same space, but we have to support each other.
Yeah.
And that's the correct answer.
I love it. And you're always going to speak up for righteousness. I know that. When I think about you, again, doing all these jobs, Congresswoman Lee, when you think about your work in the tech sector specifically, what would you most want to be known for? Your legacy?
Oh boy. Hopefully breaking through for people of color, for African-American women, for people who never, African-Americans in general, who never had a chance or wouldn't have had a chance. And I want them to know that I don't like the language diversity really when it comes to certain sectors. And Reverend Jackson schooled me on this. And I'd like to be known for someone who fought for racial equity and racial justice, not just diversity, but justice in the tech sector.
That's powerful. And when you think about the next generation of leaders in this space, what would you implore them to do? What's the call to action that you would give them to ensure they don't bury your work, but they build on it?
They build it. Just take the baton and keep at it. And just know that this structure and the system needs not just reforming, but you've got to shatter in many ways some of the structure and rebuild it. And so we've got to remember, you've got to go in and try to say, this is wrong. When I say dismantle, you've got to go in and don't just say, look, we need to kind of reform this. You go in and say, no, this is wrong. This is a bad policy. It's exclusionary and it keeps Black people from getting in. Let's build one that has equity, racial equity at its base. So you got to get in and break it up and build something new.
That's so
you got to transform it.
Yeah. And I think the transformation is required politically, in every industry, economically, right? Like even our healthcare systems, transformation is really required. Everywhere where there's a system, we know that systemic oppression has been present, and so we have to transform it. Radically reimagine.
That's so right, reimagine. Yeah, that's what we got to do.
I love that.
Stay at it. I mean, this is a long-term marathon, and gosh, we've come a long way, but we've got so far to go. And so the future and young people and their voices are being heard. And I'm glad that people are hearing them say enough is enough, because there's some of us who've been saying that for 35, 40 years. I was a community worker with the Black Panther Party in the day. And the issue then was police misconduct and police brutality. And we saw how J. Edgar Hoover initiated the COINTELPRO program, killed off a lot of people, divided us all up. It was awful. But yet I saw how the Black Panther Party started breakfast program for children. We started the George Jackson Medical Clinic, first group to do sickle cell testing. I bagged groceries and shoes and free giveaways because poverty rates were so high still in my district. So, we have to look at history and what movements have done and build upon that. Not that it's the same, but we have to understand there have been bold people who've taken some huge risks. John Lewis, Look at the risks people have taken just to get us here. So I don't tolerate people telling me, either Black people saying I'm tired or I don't believe in the system, which we don't believe in it as it currently is, but we certainly can't say we can't change it. And so we've got to vote. We've got to vote en masse and on November 3rd, because I think that African Americans, I still believe that we can change things and transform this country and help it regain its soul. Lead in that effort, actually.
Congresswoman, what do you say to the people that believe that's taking too long? Like, we got to try something different because the other way took too long or it's not working. What do you say to that? Which is popular.
Well, I say, yeah, I agree. It's taken too long. I'm not saying do it the same old way. Yeah. But I'm saying that we've got to vote. That's basic to this democracy. Unless you figure out how to dismantle the Constitution and come up with a new system. I mean, you got to vote. But I'm saying I'm not for doing things the old way, Angela. I mean, we have to have new thinking. We have to reimagine everything. And we have to do that. And again, that's why reparations and HR 100, Transformation Commission, Truth and Racial Healing, that's why it's so important. We can't do things the old way. I don't want to go back to the old way. So I'm with you. I'm with everybody who says that. But just know that, in this form of democracy, your vote is your voice. And so don't abandon that.
Well, and to your point, we wouldn't have you if people didn't exercise their right to vote. And I remind people that all the time, like, do you really want a Congress where Barbara Lee or Maxine Waters or Ayanna Pressley or, so many of our members aren't present? I don't. So it's important that we have these transparent conversations, but also transformative conversations so they know it's not a lot of rubber stamp members of Congress that we're electing. We have like the most radical members, and I don't mean radical in a negative way. They try to poison that word now. I mean, the ones who are willing to take risks. Y'all are there every single day, not only taking risks on behalf of your constituents, but on the committees you serve on. And as I said, the things that I'm like, this goes way beyond what's expected of you. And I know that it's because you believe that these are things that have a direct impact on your constituents and on Black people who you see as your constituents. And it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Angela, for that, because let me tell you, we work each and every day to change the system, to transform it, and have been 50 years. Next year, it'll be 50 years since the founding of Black Caucus. And I was a staffer for 11 years. So I remember how hard Shirley Chisholm fought as the only Black woman on the Hill. Oh my God. Wow. I remember very clearly how hard Charlie Diggs fought for Africa. I mean, what we see today, the progress we've made never would have made it had it not been for the movement on the outside and Black members of Congress. And because I've seen this over Barbara Jordan. I was there during the Watergate hearings. I've seen how Ron Dellums chaired the Armed Services Committee and how the debate around spending priorities in terms of the Pentagon's, I've seen $740 billion budget should not be. And so I've just seen over and over and over again how Black members of Congress have just pushed the envelope toward transforming this country. And so, I will take on anybody who says they don't want to participate, because believe you me, you're letting others participate and others are going to destroy our lives.
Woo, that's good. I don't have another thing, but I do know I'm going to schedule a whole other conversation with you about early CBC days and those 61 recommendations to President Nixon, to Richard Nixon, and to all the other things that CBC members have done to both legislate around an agenda, to implement an agenda, to push one on a bipartisan basis. Like, we need our time. I'm gonna text you.
Yeah. No, we'll do that. And I've got a lot of old pictures too. I'll dig up.
Oh yes, I'm coming over.
I got a lot of old
Congresswoman Lee, I love you so much, and it's always like every time I sit with you, I'm like, I need another hour. Like, it's just always so good. And I just want you to know in front of everybody, y'all can hold me to this. If there's anything that I need to be doing different or better, you can always text me, ping me, call me out publicly. I want to get this right. And I want y'all to know that you have some folks who are not only carrying your torch, but happy to carry your water, your bags, and everything else, and carry the message. But I love you dearly.
Well,
I'm so grateful for who you are and how you show up for us every single day.
well, Angela, I love you back. And I love you for who you are and what you do, but also for your spirit. Because, you know, sometimes in this world of media and world of politics or in movement, the spirit is not manifested like it should be, but your spirit is always there. And I think that's what keeps us going. So just know I love you and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. Thank you,
Okay.
Congresswoman. Thank you to Rainbow Push for having us. It's always a pleasure. I hope you all learned as much as I did. I took notes. I would show them to you, but it looks like serial killer writing. But thank you so much
Well, I
for
want
doing
to thank
this.
Reverend Jackson and Bush and Reverend Bryant
Yes.
for leading the way, because they are true warriors and
They are.
visionaries and Renaissance men. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Having the internet has allowed me to explore my passions and create new ones. Over the last few months, I've been working on a children's book. It's all about a kid with big dreams who wants to succeed at all kinds of things. Sometimes he doubts himself. He wonders if he should be more realistic. But he works hard, he keeps dreaming big, and he goes on to achieve amazing things. It's meant to be a lesson for kids, but it's also a reminder for me to show the world what I can do.
Hey everybody, how are you doing out there? We are excited to bring you this particular panel for the 2020 PUSHTECH2020 conference. This panel has a stellar lineup, and it's going to be focused in on being and doing the work of equity, inclusion, and diversity in this moment now. We're going to do a little bit of a look back over the few years and how this work has changed, and just have a really good conversations with my good friend, Bernard Coleman from Gusto. Bernard and I met back when he was at Uber. Troy Claire, who's now at Amazon. Troy, you may not remember, but you and I met when I was at Yelp, and Laurent Crenshaw brought me by the office.
Yes.
Up on the hill. And then my good friend Molly, not to last but not least, currently at Salesforce, been at Salesforce as long as I've known you, I think. And we go way back, like 4 flats on a Cadillac. So hopefully we're gonna have a good conversation as friends, as colleagues, really give some sharing and some insight to this crowd. But I want the folks to know a little bit more about each of you. So want to start maybe with you, Molly, just to kind of give an overview of your background. You're a big VP now. I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us how.
Great. Thank you. Happy to be here with PUSHTECH 2020. Molly Q. Ford. I'm the Vice President of Global Equality Programs. I have a PR and marketing background. I started at Salesforce 9 years ago on the communications team, and I was one of those employees going, what about diversity? What are we doing about diversity? While PR and communications traditionally is very gender inclusive, there wasn't a lot of racial diversity. So really wondering if I'm gonna walk in a room, will I see my allies, right? Who in the room is my ally, and how I move through corporate America, right? And so that kind of led me on a journey of becoming the communications business partner to employee success, what we call HR, which also led me into this role of diversity. So I'm the founder of the Office of Equality at Salesforce, and this was supposed to be a 6-month project, a trial for me to just make some recommendations and then go back to my day job. So the first thing I did was hire my boss, our Chief Equality Officer, Tony Profit. And once Tony got on board, I was like, okay, I'm going back to PR. Please don't make me go. And then I had the opportunity to make this my full-time job. So I serve 4 functions for the company.
Wow.
I serve 4 functions for the company: employee engagement, how we very purposefully touch our employees with our core value of equality. The second is our employee resource groups, our ERGs, so how we engage them, D&I data and consultancy, showing up to our leaders with scorecards and talking them through diversity actions they can take. and then also partnerships and customer engagement. So that's what I lead.
Nice, thanks.
Thank you.
That's a lot. But we can talk about how much a lot this job is a little bit later. We'll go to Troy. We'll go to you now. Tell us a little bit about how you got to Amazon.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Really excited to be at PUSHTECH2020. So I have a background from working on Capitol Hill. I was a chief of staff to Congressman G.K. Butterfield from North Carolina. And he, when he was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, worked with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's no stranger to any of us, around creating CBC Tech 2020, which was really about complementing the work that Reverend Jackson was doing and really thinking about a legislative strategy to partner with the work that he was doing from the nonprofit side. And so originally a Brooklyn native, spent my time working on campaigns as well as in nonprofits. And then, like I said, ended up on Capitol Hill before joining Amazon about 2 years ago. So I worked on our policy team and I lead a number of our engagements with nonprofit groups, social justice organizations, as well as our economic opportunity policy, which is focused on education and healthcare and jobs. So really excited to be with you all today and to be here talking about this very, very timely topic at this very, very important time.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for coming to Tech.
Hey, glad to be here.
Mr. Bernard Coleman, you're up next, friend. Tell us all about how you got to Gusto, what you're up to right now.
Well, thank you, PUSHTECH2020, for having me. Rachel, thank you for being our esteemed leader and pulling this panel together. So I'm glad to be here with all of you. What brought me to tech? So much like Troy, I know Troy from way back. I used to be on the East Coast and I used to work on Capitol Hill, cutting my teeth in the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and just working campaigns with always the goal of helping people and trying to do that in a way was maximizing my effort and hopefully at scale. So I worked in campaigns for a number of years. I guess what prompted my transition to tech was I was Hillary Clinton's chief diversity and HR officer on her presidential campaign in 2016. We know how that went. And from there, I went to Uber. We all know how that went, but that was challenging, great learnings, great experience. And then I find myself at Gusto, which is just where purpose meets passion, which meets alignment. I'm the chief diversity and engagement officer there. And I focus on 3 areas. It's RISE, which is our diversity and belonging program. So that RISE stands for representation, inclusion, social impact, and equity. Employee engagement or employee relations, which is basically investigations and making sure that staff feel and know they can trust the process and that, it's restorative in how we do that process. And then there's governance and compliance, thinking about policy development as it relates to the people side of the world, anti-harassment trainings and things of that nature. So it's a great company, and it's just nice when you look at the totality of your career, how you can see your passion living out and actually helping people. So that's what brought me to tech.
Yes. Well, welcome to Tech 2. And I really want to give you a hug about the 2016 thing, but we can talk about that later. I just realized I haven't introduced myself to the PUSHTECH2020 family because I feel like I'm around family and I don't need to introduce myself to family, but I'm going to. Hey, everybody, Rachel Williams. I'm the head of equity, inclusion, and diversity at X, the Moonshot Factory. And you might be asking yourself, what the heck is that? Well, X, the Moonshot Factory, is the secret lab of Alphabet, if you will. We are the originators and creators of novel technology and businesses like Waymo, driverless cars. Ever heard of those? Came from X. We have a lot of other things we're working on that I can't tell you about because I'd have to kill you. So that, I'll leave it there. So Troy, we're gonna get into it.
Okay.
You mentioned Reverend Jesse Jackson's involvement. And for me, I always start every talk with everybody about I wouldn't be NEID DAI DNI if it was not for the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his call to action at Google with their shareholders and really calling out the fact that we needed to share and be transparent about demographics within the tech industry. And that was in 2012, 2013. It's 2020. tell me a little bit about how your policy work and the things that you're doing. Like, it's all interconnected, I'm realizing. Civil rights, policy work, tech, EID. What is Reverend Jesse Jackson's involvement meant for you, or meant to you?
Well, obviously, you know, he is the leader that we all follow in this work, because he has figured out how to be very strategic and engage the company from the shareholder perspective. And we know that the shareholders ultimately own the company, right? So that has been really key, and really be having a as they used to say, the inside outside strategy, where he could work the outside strategy, but really using the legislative strategy on Capitol Hill under the leadership of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus to really say, hey, you know, the tech companies have an interest in policy, and that they have an interest in working with this community. And so that CBC Tech 2020 initiative was really the first time that the Congressional Black Caucus put a stake in the ground to say, hey, this is not combative, right? We want to work with you, and we have to have a holistic approach, right? Because that's the thing that I think was not just about hiring, right? But it was about contracting. It was about the C-suite. It was about the board of directors. And so I think that was really important. And then doing those trips out to Silicon Valley, as you know, we were able to partner with the work that Reverend was doing, but really bring leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus to the tech companies to meet with the CEOs and have those conversations face to face. And so I think Rev, as he always does, creates the space and then allows others who want to lead on a certain issue, whether it's the Wall Street Project or what have you, to follow his lead and to do their own part, right? Do what they do best in order to support the larger movement. So he definitely set the tone for everybody who was doing this work.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point of this work is more encompassing than maybe the initial call to action, right? It is not just about diversity hiring.
Yes.
Molly, can you talk a little bit more about how this work for you personally, and I'm going to ask all of you this, but how this work has changed for you over the years, or how you've seen it change over the years? I remember being hired specifically to bring in diversity. Like, that was my one cause or job description. So I was told, and then it's much more than that now. So tell me a little bit about for you over the last few years.
Dr. King's legacy, there's a piece of that model that we follow. When he showed up to those shareholder meetings, he said, show me your data. Make your data public, right? And I think Salesforce were one of those companies where Reverend Jackson did not have to come knocking. We were like, let's be transparent. It's one of our core values. Let's show our data. And that's also the approach we take internally, sharing with our leaders their demographic data, hires, attrition, promotion, and really show them what's going on within their organization using a data-driven approach, not doing it just because it feels good or it's the headline of the week, but making sure we're making it part of business practices and policy. The other approach for us is lots of people go, why are you called equality, not called, now equity or diversity and inclusion? And really, 4 or 5 years ago, this conversation was about what is our policy stance, right? We really started to, the company was founded with giving back as a core value, but really around 2015, we started to see discriminatory legislation against the LGBTQ community, right? So we really felt a need to stand up for our employees and our customers to say, we can't legally support them being discriminated against in XYZ states, right? And that's really where Salesforce started to get in this conversation. It was born of our advocating for our employees and customers and really based in workplace discrimination.
Got it. Bernard, you were at a different place when you started this doing this work in tech, I'll say, because you've been doing this work for a while. How was it then? And how is it now?
Yeah, my introduction to tech was a baptism by fire at best. I joined Uber post the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump election. There was a lot of unrest going on in the country, but similar to what it is now, it's more intensified. And coming into Uber, I'd say for 1 week of fanfare, then the following week was just the Pandora's gates open and lots of things were unearthed, where we got to do our most amazing work as we dealt with the things that were unearthed. So that was very eye-opening, thrilling, scary, all those emotions all at one time. But you got to do the interesting thing when you're in the throes of crisis. I think we could define it as a crisis, what Uber is going with, delete Uber and other allegations that came to the light. Sunshine is the best antiseptic. So we got to actually do some amazing work. We really got our ERGs up and running, first diversity report, greater transparency, pay equity. So it was a very different place because there just wasn't much tolerance. I felt like people went from pitchforks to podcasts, and people were very vocal, and they were just going to let people know what time it was. And so you just had to really have your ear to the ground, understand what people are going through, and really try to be empathetic and understanding what these shared feelings were and how you can act change the best way you could. So it was a really interesting time to enter tech. And now I look back with more rose-tinted glasses and say it was a lot of fun, but at the time it was like, wow, this is a lot. But I'm grateful for that experience.
So I feel the change in the work, right? It is not just about representation and hiring. Molly, you mentioned you share your attrition numbers, which, you know, I would say 6-7 years wasn't really a thing people were sharing. We weren't sharing the whole view. It was just about who was coming in. Look at our 2013 class, very diverse, like not talking about who was leaving or, you know, all of that. And now I think we've all grown as professionals in this work, and we've all learned a lot, and we've all learned together. But this is also a very different time to do this work. How have you all adjusted, if anything, how your approach? Are you focused more in one area on the policy like you, Troy, or is it more on performance management and retention and keeping people, or, you know, like where is your focus now? My focus back in 2013, 2014 was all about let's bring the troops in with no idea about how to keep folks. Like that was not a conversation.
Sure. So I think the other thing that we used to focus on before is we just said, get them in there, right? Just for the non-tech roles. Let's focus on the non-tech roles so we can increase and boost the numbers. And I don't think that was the most effective strategy as well, because it kind of let folks off the hook for getting folks for the tech role as well as the non-tech roles. And so we had to have that as part of the larger conversation. But I think there are three key parts to it, and that's why policy becomes so important to this, because what people are asking nowadays is, are you authentic? Right? Do you really mean what you say?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just have diversity policies internally. You have to speak up on public policy, which Molly was talking about, right? You have to speak up on the issues that matter to these communities. And then the third part of that is you have to engage the community, right? You have to interact with these communities. So you have to have that internal policies, you have to have the public policy, and you have to have an engagement strategy. And I think that is so important, what I've seen, and particularly at a place like Amazon, just inspired by the work of our Black employee networks. And we know that they can range across different companies about how vocal and how strong they are. But what I've really been proud of is that our Black employee network sees those three, right? We can't have a policy position, but then don't live by that internally, or we can't engage the community and say we care about poverty and social justice, but don't have that in our public policy. And we can't do the work and say we're for diversity and inclusion internally, but not look at the larger country and society. So I think the change in the work is a more holistic approach to not only diversity, equity, inclusion internally, but externally as well, and where we stand as a company. And so having that in the company values about what you speak up on and having the willingness to speak up on, I think is a huge change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I tell people what's internal is external in this day and age.
Right.
Full stop. So I don't think that's a separation of the two. It could be a medium post in a hot second, or some other thing.
Something, right.
I love the way you put that. I probably might have you come speak at X because I need a little some folks to hear what you have to say. Somehow they're not hearing me. Bernard, what are you focused on right now as it relates to this work?
I think with everything that's been said on the panel, it has to be more holistic. It can't be that singular focus that we used to have. Where it's like just diversity. That's just you're going to be doomed to the same results if you just focus on one singular pillar. So it has to be more fulsome if you want to have the effectiveness you seek. So, that's why at Gusto, we do representation, inclusion, social impact, and equity. And if you go across those 4 pillars, like you're thinking about representation, bringing in folks who have different backgrounds, and then making sure they feel included. Then there's a social impact piece. I think that's exactly what Troy was talking about. Like, you have to be that old internal, external strategy. The two have to align. Otherwise, people are going to say, that's incongruent. I don't believe you. I don't accept it. And then there's the equity piece, is making sure you're not going to always have the same outcomes, but you can at least say we have an equal playing field for you to succeed. So I think what I've seen with the industry change is like the call letters have increased, like the diversity and inclusion, belonging, equity, like whatever the acronym they use, it has expanded.
We should go D&I plus, like the LGBTQ plus community now. Like it's just called D&I plus.
Yeah, then it's all inclusive of your strategy needs to be multi-tiered and multi-decade in the approach, because otherwise you do these one-offs, you're just not gonna be efficient. And so I've seen greater rigor. I think I've seen a lot of the folks in this space have up-leveled, and it's actually very nice to see, instead of like fly-by-night folks and folks who by identification say, well, I can do this work, but not do the work, so it's just refreshing to see I want to say we're getting a greater amount of respect, and I think people are acutely aware of what's going on.
Yes. And Bernard and Rachel, can I just jump in here? Do you all think that adding all of these extra letters caused us to lose focus, right? If we're just trying to add the kitchen sink, or is that helping us actually be more inclusive, right? Because the terms are constantly changing. I remember Congresswoman Barbara Lee always talked about, we just used to call this affirmative action, right? And so now, right, we keep coming up with different configurations in IED or IND or DEI or ABC. And so are we getting lost in the nomenclature, or is that really helping to have a holistic view?
I think it's helping, because I think what was misunderstood, even though I was hired at one particular organization to do diversity hiring, I ended up building ERGs. I ended up weighing in on our PR and comm strategy. I ended up weighing on, and I wasn't being recognized for that work because that wasn't in the job description. And now I think it's the realization that this job is all encompassing, way beyond HR, which I'm so thankful to say, like, I don't report under HR. I report to the COO. Like, this is a business strategy. They understand that where I am now. I don't think that would have ever happened 7 years ago. Like having, a chief diversity officer or head of D&I reporting to the COO. Like, that would have probably been a huge fight, and it would have been shut down immediately, because it was viewed as, this is a people issue, people problem, people challenge. And yeah, we might need your advice on one or two things around public policy and some other things and some other things and some other things, but I feel like now we get the credit. Molly, what do you think? You got all these jobs right now.
You wear so many hats. I actually agree with everything Troy and Bernard were saying, because the one difference now is everyone thought that's diversity. Oh, that's Office of Equality job. Go talk to them. It's actually a leadership job. Everyone needs to have some skin in the game and own this. I'm not in the room when you're actually hiring. I don't see every candidate that comes through. I don't understand every exit interview that happened, right? Where I'm looking at data, these leaders are in front of people. So getting folks to understand it's not just my job. But I do think this, the incidents that have happened in the news, and I want to call them by name, excuse me, whether it's like the killing of Ahmaud Arbery or the murder of George Floyd, it's making people wake up. I just need them not to get fatigued and lose the thrill, right?
I'm so worried about that.
That's my issue, that I need this same momentum. But also I have like majority culture, well-meaning allies going, I want change now. Okay, we're unpacking 400 years worth of stuff here, right?
Slow your roll, settle down. Pace yourself.
That's exactly it. And I'm like, please don't lose the thrill and don't move on to the next shiny object, right?
What do you think was the difference? Because we were all doing this work wherever we were, fighting for justice, let's just say. When Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, like the list goes on and on. What is going on with this in particular? And since then, there have been other, murders and killings of Black men, Black bodies. So what was it about that moment on my birthday, no doubt, May 25th.
I've thought a lot about this because I wondered too. I was like, why this moment? These are all been terrible. Why now? And as trying to be a student in history, I try to look back at '68 and see, like, what are the common threads or common elements that we could see and kind of study. I think it's very similar to the unrest that's going on in the country. And I think what COVID is doing is you can't turn away. I think for a lot of folks, they could go, that seems tough over there, on to the next thing, because that's not my life. But now you're in front of your TV, you can't leave your house, you can't unsee what you just saw. So I think we have their attention. I do wonder, to Molly's point, like, will they stay with it? Will they move on to the next thing because it's just too taxing? I worry about that too. Because there is a lot of momentum, and I'm seeing it hasn't slowed down yet, which has been surprising, because I thought, this is going to be a summer trend? And then people are like, glad that's over. But I feel like, I just think it's the combination of all these moments: unrest, COVID, election season, which is looking pretty contentious. All those things together, people are being their base selves. So I think they're just paying attention. So I hope we can keep at least that going as well. I totally agree with Molly. Like, I could just see the slipping away, and we go, this moment was squandered. We didn't make the progress we needed to make.
Yes, I feel that pressure.
And can I add one thing? I think, right, you know that book, The Tipping Point, right? Michael Gladwell, right? That all of those things that you mentioned added up to this tipping point. I think if you add to that too the juxtaposition of your first Black president, and then to see the disrespect, the killings, the aggression, the lack of care for life side by side, when you thought that we had reached one point of racial equity.
Yeah, we thought we were post-racial.
That low point, right? Exactly. When people were talking about the post-racial and is there even racism anymore, that you go to see that, and it was just so jarring, I think, for a community, as Bernard said, that was already on edge, right? And that's the other thing, to the point that Molly and Bernard made, right? This is not just about criminal justice. This is about healthcare. This is about economics. This is about fairness, opportunity, community growth. And so I think that the challenge for us who do this work is to broaden the conversation for our colleagues who may only want to talk about criminal justice or policing reform, which is a key, very important pillar, but it is not the only thing.
That's right.
And I think that also, why you see the protests are very diverse and even international, is because people were pushing back against a lot of pressures in their lives on a variety of issues. And so I think that it was just a moment where everybody was at a point where they reached their tipping point.
Yeah. We had Ijeoma Olu, who wrote So You Want to Talk About Race, speak shortly thereafter. And she said something that literally brought me to tears. I was interviewing her, and she said something, and I let me get off this camera right now. And about the moment. And she said, what she thinks had the greatest impact, in the moment, was the fact that COVID has put to the forefront everyone's mortality. Like, everyone in this moment is thinking and worried about their safety on a number of different levels, whether it's dying from catching, getting sick, losing your job, like all of these things that people from underserved, underrepresented, underprivileged, all of that have been experiencing for decades, years, hundreds of years, like dealing with the worry of mortality, the worry of, joblessness, the worry, like all of that. So she was like, it's really leveled the playing field and brought a lot of people to the same point. And I was like, this is a moment. What are some ideas that you all have been playing around with to keep our overrepresented, very enthusiastic majority allies, accomplices, and those who are desiring to be such? Like, any ideas that you can share? Because I am looking for some. I'm really trying to pace folks, because they're wearing me out. But two, I know there's more to come, right? We're in a race moment now. We could be in an LGBTQ moment, a Muslim moment, another, like we could be in another moment. So like, so what are y'all doing? Have you been, any ideas twirling around up there? Do tell.
We've been talking about educating yourself. Educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. And listening, right? Do a bunch of listening sessions. Very candidly, our Black employees are like, okay, we're tired, we're worn out.
Yes.
So we're telling our well-meaning allies, Google is free. So you can go educate and find something. We put out to be an actionable ally, read these books. Watch these podcasts. Listen to a podcast, or we gave a recommended reading list, a recommended action list. Here's where you can channel your donations. Here's the Bold Force, our Black employee resource group, their calendar of volunteering. Why don't you join? So we really said, here's some things where you can go be actionable. And the list is exhaustive, and we still had people going, no, we want more. And so we're like, that part. And then we've been able to create councils. So we started our Racial Equality and Justice Task Force, and it has 4 Ps. We actually stole these from Melody Hobson, so I want to give a sister her credit.
Yep, right.
Philanthropy, policy, and purchasing power.
Wait, say them again.
People, philanthropy, policy, purchasing power. So we brought together a task force of employees and said, brainstorm everything you think we should be doing in these 4 categories. So of course we got great ideas. Some ideas we had to put on the cutting room floor. We created a business plan for that. And then we said, we'll come back and report back to the task force every month how we're doing it. So for example, I'm involved in the people pillar. We're saying, okay, let us go execute, and then we'll come back and give you updates. But we also are doing a good job of giving our very well-meaning allies a role, give them something to do, especially if
keep busybodies busy.
Yes, and I think to add to that, right, and we were talking a little bit before about how we have longevity. It's really trying to integrate this with the core of the business. So every team is not saying, okay, not just how do I have diverse employees, but is my product or my services actually making sure that we're being inclusive, right? So Amazon is creating minority business storefronts, right? That's what we do. We have a store online, and we're creating storefronts with products that highlight Black-owned businesses and Latino-owned businesses. And so that is something that is part of saying, hey, this is a core part of the business, let's put it together, right? We have Prime Video, and we just put out a documentary called All In, which follows voting rights and Stacey Abrams' fight for voting rights, right? So it's a part of the business because
y'all got money at Amazon.
We put it out. But whatever you're working on, you have a way to connect that to the work. And so for all of the well-meaning allies, it's saying, think about your products, think about your services, and are you including people that way? That's the longevity, right? When it's not only policy or the diversity team or the HR team investing in these initiatives, when it's the business units making it part of their business, their marketing spend, their product development spend, then it's a core part of the company. And I think that's the way to have the longevity.
Yeah, I mean, building off of what Molly and Troy have said, you do have to integrate it. There's a reason employee engagement, sometimes when people go, what does that mean? It's really nebulous. That's the whole point. I want people to understand it's the entire employee journey. It's not just one leg of your journey. And so what we've done, we were very fortunate at Gusto, because we're a people platform focused on small business, and we think, obviously, the better you understand your business, the more folks you can serve. So you want your leaders to go through first. And so we actually started the RISE journey last year. And what was important about that, we think that if your leaders are a little further ahead, so when your other managers might follow, your individual contributors might follow, you could have your leaders say, look, I know the way. I've already been there. Let me show you too. So one, that helped us with buy-in, but 2, that made other people want to follow suit. So thankfully, we were already started on this journey. And when the murder of George Floyd happened and everyone was paying attention, I would say that track work was laid. And then that came down to the planning of making sure that the strategy aligned with the moment. And when I think about it, where our strategy was prior to George Floyd, it would have been weak had we come out with a strategy to address all that was going on. So it really did have to be those 4 pillars of representation, inclusion, social impact, and equity to be holistic, to be fulsome, and then actually touch on every part of the journey, like the hiring, the progression, and the retention. I think if you aren't doing it that way and getting leaders in, I think it's a tougher road ahead. And I think also it's just encouraging people to slow down, to speed up. Like, let's get this infrastructure right. Because to Molly's point, education and awareness, like, I wouldn't go sit for the bar exam, never having gone through law school or studied. I would study first. I would prepare first, and then I would take on that big test. So we're trying to encourage folks doing the same thing. Like, let's talk. So you want to talk about race, reading White Fragility, Melody Hobson's Colorblind and Colorblind, but really trying to help them get educated. And like, now that you know, the more you know, the more you grow. Go out there and do that stuff. But before then, it's like, let's do education. Let's slow up and learn.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that the education piece is big. I don't know if you all saw that story a couple of weeks ago, or the report that 75% of adult Americans do not know that the Holocaust existed or happened. Americans. Our education system is clearly doing a disservice. And if they don't know about the Holocaust, I worry about what else that folks are not learning and don't know about. And so this idea of self-education is very near and dear to my heart. And I try and call it a journey for folks to let them know and signal, this is not a workshop, a 2.5-hour workshop. This is not going to be done in just one book and one documentary. Like, this is a commitment to a journey of learning about what's been happening. And you're starting with race, but there are so many other groups that we could be learning about. Like, we just came off of 30 years of ADA. So pace yourself. Let's have discussion. Let's talk. We talked a little bit or a lot about some of the challenges. We didn't really call them that, but I'll say that, of this job, of doing this work. What's gotten easier? I feel like there's a couple things have gotten easier in this moment. What's gotten easier for you all? I won't lead you with what's gotten easier for me, but do tell what's gotten easier. Anything?
I'd say we don't have to make the business case anymore. I don't have to go like, well, explain to me why I should care. Explain to me why this is important.
That's true.
That has not been a subject at Gusto or I've seen any other company. I haven't seen that business case argument being pushed anymore, because I gotta admit that was very, very annoying to say like, so I'm telling you why you shouldn't be racist or sexist or biased. It was infuriating internally. So I haven't had to deal with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Troy, anything gotten easier?
Yeah, I think in some ways, the conversation is easier, right? Some people didn't even want to have the conversation before, or they wanted to do that at a panel or at a specific set time where you had that discussion. I think in some cases it has gotten easier to act, right? Because there's this impetus to act quickly. I think that's also balanced with the harder part is to be authentic, right? It's like, okay, we made a donation, but what's the next step? And what's the substance there? And what's the long term? And so I think while it became easier to act in some cases, right, it becomes harder to say, well, what's the long term? I understand you felt this was an emergency, and rightly so, right? But now, because as you mentioned, right, there's another emergency coming, right? We may not know what it is or who it is or what community it will impact. But I think that's where the harder and the easier kind of come together.
Yeah. Molly, anything gotten easier? You think?
Few things. I would say it's not just me going, what about diversity? What about equality? Leaders are being asked by their teams, what are we doing about this? So I do think there's a different pressure. And then they're coming to me going, oh, I need a strategy. Oh, I need to spin up this, or oh, I need to do that. But at least it's not just the Office of Equality showing up talking about diversity. They're being asked in a town hall. We're actually normalizing, as we like to say, calling in Black.
Yes.
Like, we're normalizing, there's a Breonna Taylor verdict, I'm not in the mood for your foolishness today, right? And disarm that so employees can say, I need a wellness day.
Yeah, that is a huge change. That is one that I have called in a lot lately and given people the space to call in, not just for Breonna Taylor or issues related to Black people, but there have been things that have happened to women in ICE detention centers, for example, and things like that. And so I think the space has been created for all of us to take a breather when you need a breather, because something external that's going on in the world is affecting how you show up at work. I think that's great. For me, I'm glad I don't have to whisper racist anymore or racism anymore. Like, this is a part of our lexicon in the last 3 months. With everybody now reading anti-racist, like, great, I can say the word without having to whisper it. Or white supremacy. Like, that was definitely, I remember being on a panel with a peer of ours, and she's always been bold, always been bad. And so, you know, like, really pushing the needle, quite a disruptor. I love her to death, but I pulled her after the panel where she was like, and white supremacy. I was like, oh my God, it was 2016. And I was just like, Lord Jesus, like, what news outlets are out there? Like, I can't, like, scoot in my chair away from her, you know, that kind of thing. Like, now, like, you sound very intelligent when you call things out with its proper name. So I find I'm having easier time having authentic conversations because we have now a shared language. I think it isn't just the diversity person who has this language. More people know what I mean when I say that. I wanted to talk about predictions for the future. We talked a lot about what's gone on in the past with COVID and everything happening, and us now working from home. The future of work is looking a lot different. And speaking of which, our friend Troy had to jet. He had something going on in his building and he needed to make sure that he was safe. So it's just us chickens now, Bernard and Molly and me. We wish our friend Troy well. Somebody will text him later. But we're gonna carry on this conversation. Any predictions for the future? If we're gonna have a Push Tech 2030?
Tech 2030. There's no racism, xenophobia, sexism. We're all out of a job. We're over to a customer job now. We're working at a call center.
Well, the call center's been taken over by robots. That's what we.
Right, we're programming the robots that took our jobs because we don't need equality, diversity, inclusion by 2030, right? Isn't that our prediction? In a more realistic world, and at the rate this world is going, I see it being more of a global aspect, right? There's so many dimensions to diversity. Once we start talking about data and what percentage of our employees identify as Black or underrepresented, then folks in Canada said, what about us? And folks in London said, I'm having the same experience as Black Americans. So really, we're on this journey of voluntary self-ID on a global basis, right? What does it mean to be underrepresented in which countries? Instead of just showing up talking global in Europe, how can I talk to, and BAME, is that the term? Is the community okay with that term? So I feel like for us, it's definitely gonna be global. I think as every company says, I need to diversify, we need to come up with strategies so we're not stealing each other's 2% Black or 4% Latinx population.
Just moving chess pieces.
Yeah, what are we actually doing to actually widen the door and make greater opportunity? So we're not companies that are just having entry-level talent, or as Troy said, the non-tech talent is the diverse talent, right? Yeah. So what is that opportunity for everyone to participate in this economy? I think that's one of the real strategies we're gonna have to come up with.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's all spot on. I think, I'm wondering it depends how long remote work continues. Mm-hmm. I think that's an unlock. So like, I'm really excited about it in one sense, because it's a equalizer. We're all calling in from somewhere. We're all on Zoom. It's not like anyone's being excluded. But now that talent that they say, well, there's nobody here in the Bay, or there's nobody in our respective locale. Now I can go anywhere and get that person in Memphis who's the best coder in the world who couldn't move because of maybe they had a family they have to take care of. Now we can actually go after talent that before the excuse was we can't get them or they won't move here. So that barrier is gone. So if our tendencies with remote work stick, then I think you can have these offices of one where people can work online and be really collaborative. We'd have the proof that this actually works. So I'm really excited about that in terms of a talent unlock. I think it makes our jobs a lot easier for us to have more representative offices, because we can just pull talent from anywhere. I think the other thing to think about is unrest. I think a lot about this election. And I think no matter who wins, there's going to be some unrest.
No matter.
And which makes our jobs dramatically more difficult, because we're also engaging in this COVID era. Like, how do we make our people feel supported? How do we make our folks feel heard? How do we make our folks feel seen? How are we tending to their needs? So I actually worry, like, because we're, you know, before it was like everyone's in person, you get to engage, interact, you can read body language and just understand what people need. Of course, you have, like, you know, pulses and you can hear from people, but like you don't really know what they need. So what I worry about is like those unknowns and how people respond to what's going on in the world, and they're still expected to perform and stand up. And you know, we talked about checking out, like I'm taking a black day, I'm checking out because of what's going on.
Yeah.
Everybody's dealing with the situation. And so I just wonder, like, I have no idea what that looks like. And we've never gone remote for this long to even understand what are the mechanisms that we use to make sure people feel that love, that they maybe why they joined the company in the first place. So I've been thinking about a lot, like what techniques should I be thinking about that's on the forefront? And I'm not going to say I'm at a loss, but I just got theories at this point. We'll see what works.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm excited about thinking about my work as it relates to X, which is a part of Alphabet that builds other Alphabet companies. And how can I make sure that EIDB, you know, whatever, is included into what we are building in terms of our products. You know, as we think about driverless cars, it would have been great to have an equity lens, an inclusive lens, maybe at the forefront. Anything that's being built. And I think that to me is the next wave, because we started off in the 2010s-ish, talking about hire. It's all about diversity hiring. And then we've kind of gravitated. I would love to see this as equity, inclusion, and diversity is just as important as the marketing strategy for all of our products. Like, we want to hire you just solely to focus on product inclusion. Our recruiting team they already know what they're doing with diversity. Like, our diversity representation is already there. Our, you know, how we retain people and move people and promote people and is already there. We need you to focus in on helping us build inclusive products. Like, to me, that would be like future of work, or it should be now work, but future of work. So we only have a couple more minutes. This is my last question. It wasn't in the prep doc, sorry. Y'all have been rolling with the punches with your girl. Appreciate you. This is you know, an easy one, softball, if you will. But I think one that is very important, because as Molly just mentioned, 2030, we probably would have worked ourselves out of a job. All of us probably would, you know, let's hope that's the case. But just in case it's not, what advice do we have for the next generation that will be discussing this topic? I don't plan on coming back in 2030. Sorry, y'all. Tell Rev, tell everybody, like, don't hold my invitation. 2030, Rachel's going to be busy doing something else somewhere on some beach someplace. Next generation of leaders, what advice would you have for them right now who are coming in, who bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like we all were, you know, like, yay, diversity hiring, and it quickly found out it's a lot more than just that 10 years later. What do you say to them now? What skills do they need? What should they be thinking about? What should they be fighting for? I don't know.
I think, one, be a student of history, because there's nothing new under the sun. That can help you plan better for the future. I think we've all said this, pace yourself, because you come in with all that energy and then it doesn't move as fast as you hoped. And that could be demoralizing. So as part of it is pacing yourself and managing your own expectations. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing is, are you an activist or are you a practitioner? And how do you, if you are both, how do you marry the two? But I think you need to understand what your duty is and how are you going to show up? Because it's hard to be both and occupy those same spaces. I guess that would be my dad advice.
Well, that's fair. You are a dad, so cool. Molly, what you got?
That's a great question.
Wisdom.
My cool auntie advice would be.
You are a cool auntie, so that's fair.
So I was thinking, this future generation, be values driven. Be all about your values, right? Like, as an example, I'm in a Black Women in Tech Facebook group, and a sister will say something shady happening at her job, and I'm like, why are you still there? Why are you still there? Like, be values driven and don't compromise, and define for your life, this is how I prefer to be treated, this is how I will be treated, and really get with a company that aligns with your values. There's plenty of tech companies out there, and don't budge on that.
That was advice for Rach. I mean, anyway, that's so good. That's so good. We're gonna leave it there. Thank you, Molly, for sharing your wisdom and insight over this last hour or so. Bernard, thank you for your time and wisdom and sharing with the audience over the last hour or so. And we want to thank Troy, wherever you are. We hope you're safe. Thank you for your time. Hope you're okay. And I just want to thank all the attendees for being here with us, going through this journey with us. Want to encourage you to stay tuned. The rest of the conference is going to be lit, like the kids say. I just had to say it. And tune in for more tomorrow. So come back. Thanks.
You know, everybody, it's been an incredible journey to watch the diversity and inclusion conversation. Thank you, Rachel, for putting together that fantastic panel, because really that's what we've built into this entire PushTech 2020 initiative. It's been about diversity, bringing inclusion, but it also brings opportunity and access to opportunity. That's what we've been trying to build now all of this time, this 20 years that Reverend Jackson has been pushing through Silicon Valley in the tech industry, these last 5 years that we have specifically and strategically engaged. It's been all about opportunities, opening doors, making ways for not only people in tech, but those around tech who want to be a part of the tech industry, those that do marketing and those that are involved with financial services, all of these various partners that we have sharing tonight, as a matter of fact, talking about how the tech industry just engulfs us all, and we all have a space and a place. We all have a voice in technology. And guess what? You also have a voice that I want you to share right now. All right, those of you who are watching us, come on now. All of you that are watching and are on social media, I need you to hashtag out PushTech2020. Go ahead and hashtag it out, hashtag it out. If you're not yet following Reverend Jackson, you need to follow him on Instagram and Twitter. You can even follow Joseph Bryant Jr. on Instagram and Twitter. But this is a tech conference, so I would be remiss if I didn't at least remind you of technology. Follow Rainbow Push, follow PushTech2020. Go ahead, hashtag out the messages. As people are sharing these wonderful insights, go ahead and hashtag them out. Make sure you're following our speakers. We want to encourage them in their work as well. But as we make our voices heard through technology, your voice and your vote really matters. And I'm grateful because as a part of our Push Tech initiative, we include folks from the political world, folks that are involved in Silicon Valley, obviously, people that have connections in various areas of business. And of course, as a national sports director, we also have people involved in sports. And so I'm grateful that we have several folks that are going to jump into our conference over the next couple of days and talk about our voice and our vote. It's so important that you vote. It's so important that you get out to the polls on November 3rd. And because of that, my friends, I'm going to allow a few of my friends to just jump in right now and share this message with you. You're going to see it popping up all over for the next couple of days. Our voice and our vote.
Hi, I'm Atan Thomas, retired NBA player with the Washington Wizards. This is one of the most, if not the most, crucial elections of our lifetime. Everything is on the line on November 3rd. Let's not leave it to chance or take our foot off the gas because of what we see in the polling numbers and predictions. We've seen that play before. We need to sprint to the voting booth like never before, while being prepared for every obstacle that will be thrown our way. If you have a mail-in ballot, make sure it's sent ahead of time. If you can vote early in your state, please do so. If seniors in your community have mobility challenges, please be willing to help. We need all hands on deck. I am honored to be a part of this Your Voice, Your Vote campaign with Reverend Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Push Sports, and Push Tech leader, Pastor Joseph Bryant, and all of those around the country echoing this important message during this crucial time.
2020, here we are, everybody. 2020, this is the year. This is the year. It's not only the 5-year anniversary, but really 2020 was always the basis of our understanding of our purpose. 2020 is perfect vision. And so our idea was we wanted to have a vision. We wanted to be able to have a perspective, an improved look of what Silicon Valley and the tech industry look like. We wanted to be able to have a clear vision and understand that diversity and inclusion really matters. And so we thank all of the companies that have come alongside to help us improve our vision, our 2020. It doesn't look exactly the way we want it just yet, but it is getting a little bit better day by day, and we're grateful. So we want to continue to partner with these amazing organizations. Big shout out to Facebook because they are not only a session sponsor for tomorrow during our very special hip hop event with young people, but we're doing our Connected Churches Town Hall next week with one of their partners, Penn America. And we're going to reach out to our entire faith network for our monthly Faith Tech Connected Churches Town Hall next Thursday night at 4 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern next Thursday night. We want you to join us because we're going to be talking about how to make sure we have the right information to make the right decisions around voting, around the election, and doing what we need to do to handle our business. And so this is what PushTech is all about, providing you with information, connecting the dots, connecting the people, and doing what we do to make a difference. And we thank all of you for being a part of this experience. Go ahead, hashtag things out, tag people, let them know to join us because we got more to come. Here we go, PushTech 2020, it's on.
I'd like to introduce today our esteemed panelists. Joining us are a cross-section of individuals. We have Michael Jackson, co-head of the Equity Division for Loop Capital. Jonte Haro, head of Equity Capital Markets at Drexel Hamilton. Paige Pierce, President and CCO at McLaughlin Ryder Investments and FINRA Industry Governor for Small Firm Representatives. We also have rounding out our panel, Larry Goldman, Head of Capital Markets at Samuel A. Ramirez and Company. And I will serve as your moderator today, Cynthia DeBartolo, Chairperson of the Diversity Broker Dealer and Asset Management Coalition and CEO of Tigris Financial Partners, the only disabled and woman-owned broker-dealer in the country. With that, let me kick it off to Michael Jackson at Loop. Michael, please share a little about yourself and your firm.
Hi, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for hosting this panel and for inviting me to join. Loop Capital, my name is Michael Jackson. I work at Loop Capital. I'm co-head of equity, the equity division. Loop Capital is a 23-year-old African-American owned investment bank, one of the largest minority-owned investment banks in the country. We have approximately 200 employees spread across Chicago and New York and 22 other offices around the country. Our division in equities includes equity research, which is something that definitely differentiates us from other firms in the space. We have a 20-person equity research team, very strong in TMT, consumer, and industrials. We also have equity sales, and I also lead our equity capital markets efforts. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Michael. No, I appreciate that, Michael. And you know, I'm a huge fan of Loop and the work that you do in research. Tigris, as a research provider, also has tremendous respect for the product that you put out. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Jonte.
Cynthia, I want to thank you for hosting this panel, and I want to thank the sponsors as well as PushTech and the incredible Reverend Jesse Jackson for leading this organization. My name is Jonte Haro. I'm the head of equity capital markets at Drexel Hamilton. Drexel Hamilton was started 13 years ago by a Vietnam veteran and two-time Purple Heart winner. And today we can claim that we're still 100% military veteran owned. The CEO and the president I know from West Point, which dates myself a bit, but also shows you the excellence that we try to keep today with our leadership. What is so interesting and different about Drexel Hamilton is 60% of our employees, our full-time employees, are military veterans, including the head of all of our businesses, including equity capital markets, myself, debt capital markets, municipal sales and trading, equity trading, as well as structured products. We are impressively nearing 2 trillion of underwriting. And we're just happy to be here today and speak more about diversity and inclusion and how we can better the space for all people.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate you, and we are most grateful to the service that you and your colleagues at Drexel Hamilton have rendered to our country.
Thank you.
Joining us, you're welcome. Now, joining us will be Larry Goldman of Ramirez. Larry, please give us a little background and some of the key highlights of Ramirez. Ramirez and Company is also one of the oldest, I believe, broker-dealers in the diversity space.
Sure, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you to everyone at PushTech for sponsoring this panel and this annual event. As Cynthia said, we're probably one of the oldest firms. We actually were founded in 1971, so we're entering our 50th year. The founder, Sam Ramirez, still is at his desk every day, despite the fact that he's 80 years old. The firm is owned by 90% by the Ramirez family, who are of Puerto Rican origin, and the remainder by employees. In terms of specific differentiating factors about Ramirez, we're one of the largest of the diversity firms, not as large as Michael's firm, but we have about 150 employees in 11 offices around the country. Because we started as a retail muni firm, we have retail distribution, which is somewhat unique among the diversity firms, complementing our institutional distribution. And within our equity practice, or really our capital markets practice, we have a small group led by a PhD from Credit Suisse that run a financial strategies group, which serves as an advisory arm for our businesses. My background is I've been at Ramirez since 2002 for 18 years. And prior to that, I worked at Goldman Sachs for 16 years.
Thank you, Larry. And it's been our pleasure to collaborate with you and your colleagues at Ramirez on several opportunities. And we really do value the talent at your firm. Moving on to one of my dear friends, someone I have tremendous respect for in this industry, who's done so much, I'm going to say quietly, to protect, advocate for small firms and diversity firms. And I hope you'll learn a little bit more about the steps that she's taken that we're all benefiting from. And that's Paige Pierce.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for including me. I am the president and CEO of the Pierce Group, which is a consulting firm that is headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I am the president and CCO of McLaughlin Ryder Investments, located in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of DC. I am here today because of my decades-long commitment to and work on behalf of small and diversity-owned firms. I've been in both categories, and it is a passion of mine to advocate for small and diversity-owned firms. I've got a deep background in regulatory and legislative advocacy for these firms. Have been twice elected to the FINRA National Adjudicatory Council, which is the appellate court in the investment industry. Was honored to be elected to represent small firms on the FINRA Board of Governors. So I'm an active governor on the board. I have 2 legislative and regulatory relief focused bills in Congress right now that I was honored to have authored. That was a new experience, and have been greatly honored to work with Reverend Jackson, Rainbow Push, the Wall Street Project, and Cynthia, which, by the way, it is because of Cynthia that I've been able to work with all of those other organizations and projects, with the Diversity Broker-Dealer and Investment Advisory Coalition. So thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. And I'm looking forward to a really provocative discussion tonight on some of the points that we're going to cover. We could talk for days, but we have a set time, so we'll get through this as quickly as possible and hope to leave our listeners and viewers tonight with some great ideas, some incentives, and maybe questioning how can they help us move this forward with more opportunity, more equality, and more economic parity for diversity firms. So our first question that I'd like to throw out is about raising the bar and utilizing African-American, Hispanic, veteran-owned, and women-owned broker-dealers in financial transactions, not just from underwriting, but across the board in capital markets, from commercial paper to trading to research and money markets. Let's start first with Michael Jackson. Michael, your firm has potentially and has participated in trillions of dollars in underwritings. And obviously the firm is far more robust. Where else do you see opportunities for Loop to bring value to various corporations?
As I started to mention in the beginning, and I only touched upon a couple of pieces of Loop Capital, Loop is a very diverse organization in that I work in our equity division. However, we have a very robust fixed income platform, which includes sales and trading of taxable corporate bonds, also sales and trading of municipal bonds. We underwrite corporate debt and also municipal debt. So it's a very diverse platform, as are the other guests here on the panel. So Loop is able to work with corporations throughout their life cycle. We like to work with a lot of companies as they do private capital raises, pre-IPO raises. Obviously, we want to participate in their IPO and their secondary offering. We'd like to be there for their share buybacks. We have a very strong platform there through our equity trading desk. We want to be there when they're making mergers and acquisitions, when they are issuing additional debt. And we also have a very strategic partnership with the Bank of China, where we are their U.S. investment bank because they're not licensed here in the United States. So we act as that proxy. So we want to also help to introduce U.S. companies to companies in China where they might want to make partnerships or mergers, or if they just want to invest in China to open up manufacturing or other services. So Loop, like Ramirez, like Drexel Hamilton, should be thought of not as a minority-owned investment bank, but should be thought of as an investment bank and should be considered in the same way that you would firms that are several times our size. And we'd like to be in a situation where companies no longer assume that Tigris can't do something, that Loop cannot do something, but instead assume that we can and challenge us to do it.
Thank you, Michael. Well said. And, you know, I think you'd agree, your firm is armed to compete on real merit with any of the bigger capital markets, divisions of even the global banks. Sometimes, you know, boutiques being nimble can even do it better.
Agreed. Well said.
So let me jump over to Jean-Tay on that same question.
Well, I think Michael Jackson touched on so many great points, and I'd like to expound upon that. I think when you think veterans, you may think war fighters, but we fight for the issuer, we fight for the states, we fight for, you know, that underwriting, that advisory. We are your advocate as well. And issuers should know that we are capable, we are smart. I mentioned before, we're led by West Pointers, including myself. I'm also a Columbia Business School graduate. We have ex-Credit Suisse, ex-Wells Fargo, ex-Deutsche Bank, professionals that work at Drexel Hamilton. And so we are capable. We are not just those who have transitioned from the military and tried to get our foot into the financial services industry. We are often veterans that have transitioned into the financial services industry to those bulge brackets, but we've transitioned further to this smaller platform to help build it and hire and train other vets to bring that diversity into this industry. And I think that is an admirable mission. It's one that took me from Amazon in the room with Jeff Bezos on occasion to Drexel Hamilton, where we just hired in the past 2 months 2 veterans, one an MBA and one an undergrad from an Ivy League institution. Both vets, a fighter pilot, an infantryman. We are working on our gender diversity as well. And so when you think about what we can do, we can, I think another example, we've partnered with Goldman Sachs, and we're very appreciative of this partnership, where we have access to the money market funds of Goldman Sachs, where we have introduced a number of corporate treasurers who have capital, have excess funds that are looking for yield. And we are effectively helping them meet their goals, not only of yield for their business, but also diversity and supplier diversity specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonte. And by the way, I have a particular soft spot for veteran firms. Back in 1980, I was a congressional nominee to West Point Military Academy, one of the first class of women, one of the earlier classes of women. So I have a deep fondness and respect for all of the veterans, but particularly those that went to our service academies. Thank you. And I learned something new every time you speak about Drexel and the good work that you're doing and how you're expanding the platform there. Thank you. Larry Goldman.
Sure, thank you.
Hailing from one of the oldest diversity firms.
Yeah. Well, what is interesting, when I looked at the question, you know, I was thinking about this, that we often look at the sort of the trophy transactions, the big IPO that everyone wants to be in, or a big bond deal where an issuer is doing a significant funding for an acquisition. But we as firms are, to sort of Michael's point, we are trying to develop a broad range of services that we provide to our clients, and based on those services, earn us a place at the table at those big transactions. And sometimes, you know, we'll encounter an issuer that says, well, you don't lend money, or you don't do this, so therefore we can't include you in the big transaction. And so it works both ways. So it's really a win-win to the extent that the corporate America kind of recognizes that our firms have a diverse set of businesses, some of them less profitable than others, that we are building in order to service them. It helps us better earn a place in those big trophy deals, and it also makes us stronger firms and stronger partners. And you know, as we all grow, not unlike Goldman Sachs or Citigroup, we do slightly different things. You know, we don't have a commercial paper operation, for example, but we have a fairly significant asset management business. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we have retail distribution as well as institutional distribution, but there are other things that we don't do. And in a mature relationship between our firms and our clients, there's sort of a mutual understanding and respect, so that they use us best for where we can add value, and we can provide value to them in ways that are most helpful.
That's so well said, Larry, because I think the beauty of the diversity space is not just that you have this coalition of African American, Hispanic, veteran, women-owned, even Native American firms, but that our firms really do bring differentiated services to the table, that we are not cookie cutter of each other. And it's really important that we be viewed for our own authenticity and unique services that each firm can provide, and that each firm stand proudly on that. And I think you did a great job of identifying that. Thank you. Paige, well, you know, question may not be totally on point to your firm. I just like your thoughts around it.
I think it's very important for all of the diversity-owned firms to live in their space, to be authentic, to represent who and what they and their firms are accurately. As we can see by the quality of the panelists here, the diversity-owned firms of today are very different than those of 25 years ago, right? 20 and 25 years ago. there's been a massive uptick in quality, frankly, of participants in this space. But we still have, I heard you mention competing on merit, Cynthia, and I would underscore that. I think that diversity-owned firms have to be prepared to compete on merit, to have their arms fully around what makes their firm unique, what is their competitive advantage, how will you deliver that value. Also, I would mention sometimes it's overlooked because we have so many challenges owning and operating diversity-owned firms and still fighting to get that seat at the table, that every once in a while you'll see diversity-owned firms take their eye off the regulatory compliance ball. And so I would want to say, for the record, your broker check matters. Your regulatory record matters. It's being looked at by everybody in the room that you're trying to get into. So by issuers, by lead managers, by everyone. And so, so just sort of want to throw that in there as related to the topic, but perhaps on a different vein of the topic.
I really appreciate that, Paige, because it's going to lead me to jumping into a question that was going to come later on, but we can talk about it now, which is really the importance of risk management and transparency, and a potential RFI process for issuers and underwriters to use. Diversity firms, there's been no uniform way for any issuer or underwriter to look at all the diversity firms. It's basically your pitch book, your story. However, if they really want to maximize how to use the firms and aggregate the right firms collectively in a transaction, they have to have some way to look at variables in those firms that can be compared. For instance, what's the percentage of ownership of your firm? Is it 100% owned by veterans, or is it 51% owned by veterans? Is it 100% owned by African Americans, or is it 51%? Is it 100% owned by women, or 51? Hispanic firms, same thing, 100% owned or 51? What does your diversity of your own firm look like inside? If we're going to be brazen enough to be out there asking for the opportunity to be diversity firms and bring diversity to the transaction, we better look in the mirror and make sure our firms are diverse and represent that. What does our regulatory history look like of the firm? What is the litigation history? What are the principles, litigation and regulatory history look like? Because there's a lot to be said. You know, the culture of a firm sometimes mimics its own leadership, right? So where are the strengths of your firm? Where's your revenue coming from? These are points where an RFI can help. So let's jump back to Michael Jackson. What are your thoughts about some sort of tool or way for issuers to help look in a very uniform way and transparent way across the board at diversity firms?
I think that's an important point, Cynthia, but I think that we might want to think about it a little differently and a little broader. The 51% versus 100% ownership is an important question while the firm is still small. You want to be able to encourage minority-owned firms, women-owned firms to grow, and to also include equity as part of that growth so that they can make acquisitions, so that they can reward their employees. So as a firm grows, Loop is now 23 years old. As a firm continues to get older and older, it's going to be more and more difficult to keep it 100% because you don't want to be in a situation where you can only give equity to women, or you can only give equity to other minority employees. So I think that's an important question that we need to think about, while also staying within the spirit of the rules regarding diverse firms. I think that it's also important that we don't fall into a trap of making small and diverse broker-dealers, investment banks, prove that they aren't criminals, that they aren't, that you're not, like you referenced the broker check. I think, again, that is very important. But I would put Drexel Hamilton's broker check up against JP Morgan's, Wells Fargo, or Goldman Sachs's. And I think that that's incredibly important to differentiate, because it wasn't one of these firms on this panel that was found guilty of those crimes that are hitting the news most recently. So I think we fall into a trap of making diverse firms fill out RFIs and describe who they are, describe who their ownership is. You even get to the point where you have to describe how diverse is your diverse firm? How many women do you hire? How many minorities do you hire? If you're Goldman Sachs or one of the bulge bracket firms trying to get a investment banking transaction, you don't have to prove how many Black people you hire or how many women you hire. So why should a defined diverse firm have to make those same attestations? So I understand your point and I agree with it, but I do think that it's a slippery slope.
I see you, and I concur that there have to be some parameters around it, and it has to be weighted and scaled appropriately. I agree with you on that point. But I think for for purposes of how it is viewed, there are advantages to a Goldman Sachs weathering some marks on its license versus smaller firms. And unfortunately, in the last few years, there's been several firms that were in the diversity space that are no longer here. And they certainly hit the paper, and we're most grateful that there wasn't a lot of damage control from that, or we're grateful there was damage control around that, because it could have had some repercussions.
Agreed. And be clear that we take it very seriously at Loop Capital. Our chairman and CEO, my boss, Jim Reynolds, is African American, very involved in the Chicago community. Our president, our chief financial officer, our head of HR, our head of equities, our head of investment banking, our head of public finance, our head of sales and trade. Like, these are all African American employees. So we take diversity very seriously at Loop. What I want to make sure, though, is that we're not applying a higher standard to firms that are diverse. Knowing how hard it is to start a firm and to build a firm from scratch, let's not apply an unnecessary additional burden on those firms that we wouldn't apply to those firms that are significantly larger than them.
I think part of the conversation, because I'm a strong proponent of transparency and of accountability. And if we're in the room representing ourselves, how we got into the room is that we've represented ourselves as a diverse owned, woman-owned or minority-owned firm. I think we have to be ready to back that up. And I also know of a number of instances where again, a broker check hadn't been looked at, but then in the 11th hour of a deal, all of a sudden it is pulled. And it is, and all of a sudden it becomes apparent that diverse firm cannot actually be in that deal. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to have the credibility of the entire sector that is a growing sector, and that so many are such small firms, micro, right? Not Loop, not Ramirez. And so for those firms, I have been very supportive of the work that Cynthia and her coalition have been doing, because again, it's this opportunity to level set a little bit, and so that the entire sector is raised on the credibility scale. So I just wanted to jump in. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Michael. I do not think it should be disproportionately applied to us, as many things are. But I also, I do like the level setting a bit, so.
Agreed.
And I'll swing back to you, Paige, about something disproportionately applied. You know where I'm going on that underwriting letter. But in the meantime, Mike, do you have to jump? Do you want to add something else before I go back to Jonte and Larry?
No, let's let Jonte and Larry have a crack, please.
Jonte, jump in first, and then if you can punt over to Larry when you're done.
Absolutely. This is a very enlightening conversation, because I think it brings so many perspectives to the table, which frankly should be the case always. I think if I can add, I would hope that RFI process is much more dimensional than just an email to fill out a form and to send that off, and then the decision is made, because I think there's a dynamic where those heads of those businesses can brief and speak and interact and build rapport with those issuers, because one transaction doesn't make the relationship. And I think, you know, it is very much okay for a firm not to be in one transaction, but then try to build a relationship with the issuer that relationship lasts many more years past that one issuance. And I think that is an opportunity that issuers should be looking to. And it checks off all of, you know, Cynthia, what you've said, and Michael, what you've said as well, where you get to see those folks and you get to see that diversity. You get to understand what transactions have they been in. And then you can also, issuers can ask those questions if it's not on the paper. You know, you can you know, see, hey, well, what are the last hires, and what are the last pieces of community service, or, you know, where are the last donations? Who actually owns the firm? You can ask those questions in a much more interactive way.
I agree. And there's a lot to be gained from the building that rapport, that relationship that can never happen in the cold print of a piece of paper. So the value add that you bring in the development and the interaction with any issuer or lead underwriter is critically important, and would only augment what you would write in an RFI anyway. But you make a great point with that, Shantae. Larry, Mr. Coleman, what are your pearls of wisdom on this?
Yeah, I'll comment on a couple of things. One of the things that's actually been heartening over the, because I've been in this peer group for 18 years, is I do think the professionalism in general and the skill sets and the compliance have significantly increased. So I think that the firms we deal with, the big corporations that use all of our firms in their transactions, are much more confident that they can kind of trust us in a transaction. That's not so much a compliance issue, but more of a professionalism and skill set issue. I think the issues around compliance often happen when there's a surge of new entries into the peer group. So there's been a lot more smaller firms, as Paige mentioned, coming in. And obviously it's important that, you know, one bad apple doesn't ruin the whole darn bunch. And because there is this issue where when one of our peers has a problem, rightly or wrongly, it does sort of negatively affect the perception of all of us. You know, when Citigroup has a problem, maybe the common, you know, a populist person reading the newspaper is mad at all the banks, but within the financial system, you know, Citigroup has the problem, maybe not Morgan Stanley. So it does be, you know, we are kind of our brother's keeper in that regard.
I agree completely with you on that. I mean, that's an excellent point.
And then I'm probably over my 2 minutes, but in terms of the RFI process, one of the challenges for all potential clients is, who do we choose? I think, you know, I'm involved in both the debt and equity markets. And the debt markets, it's a little different because most issuers have been in the markets a while. They issue more frequently. They can test out different firms. And so perhaps a formal RFI isn't always necessary unless they're new to the using diversity firms, in which case I think an RFI is very, very helpful. In the equity markets, particularly IPOs, where there's no real reason for many of these companies, at least, to know us, it would be helpful if the intermediaries, the gatekeepers, whether it be the PE firms or the venture capital firms or the larger book runners, had a process, since they're sort of a gatekeeper often with the firms that are doing IPOs. The IPO also gives it a chance for the issuer by framing the questions to show what they think is important. Some people may think capital is more important. Some people incremental distribution. Some people, you know, research, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we learn when we do an RFI. And RFIs are hard. You know, if we're serious about a client or developing a client relationship, we have to put some time and effort into filling it out. So, that's another reason for them. But again, in the debt markets where there's kind of continuous issuance, and it's maybe a little bit more fluid in terms of that relationship formation process.
Well, and that, Larry, that's where I liked what Cynthia has been trying to do with sort of a best practices standardized RFI to build a database, so that then that lift isn't issuer by issuer, right? And if we can get the big boys to sort of utilize this template, then obviously it makes it much easier.
One and done. You do it once a year, and it's just a uniform one that anyone could pull. And it really just speaks about your firm and all the capabilities that you have, because oftentimes I have so many meetings with issuers and the underwriting banks that go, well, I didn't know that firm could do this. And I'm out there championing all the diversity firms. And, I had to learn where your Mike Jackson's smiling because he knows. I know where your sweet spots are, right, Shantae? And I'll get on the phone and they don't even know I've already talked about their firm to a particular issue. I'll call them afterwards and say, hey, you might hear from so-and-so. I just spoke to them about your firm. And it's because it's really important that sometimes the issuer will say to me, well, nobody can do this for us later on. I'll be like, yes, they can. Here's 3 firms, here's 4 firms that offer that right off the bat. And if the point of the RFI would really be to bring all your key services up front and center, so that your relationship goes beyond that transaction to what Jante said before, to a life cycle relationship where the issuer can pick an aggregate group of diversity firms who have specialty in that area, given the transaction that they have in mind.
Well, I totally agree, and it saves us a lot of work, but also it's like I have 4 kids. Luckily, they have this common app now when you apply to college, which I don't remember if they had it in my time. And every kid applies to 15 schools. So that common application has made the process that much easier. And we just were given some money, awarded some money into our asset management group by a client that I cover. And the client says, I didn't even know you've talked to me all these years. I didn't even know you did asset management. But somehow I'm not sure how they found out, but if there was a centralized database of what the services that each firm offered existed, I think that would just make the networking connections that much more efficient.
Exactly. So we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go through the next question pretty quickly. And there's just really 2 more points I would like to cover. While underwritings are using more and more diversity firms, I think we can all honestly say the economics don't always get to the level that we feel really do align with the diversity participation. If 98% of the economics are going to the other co-managers and the diversity firms are literally sharing less than 2% of the economics, it does beg the question of whether this is tokenism or whether or not there is a real commitment to using diversity firms. And let's start with Mike. Mike, what are your thoughts around the trend that we're seeing? We are seeing some firms start to want to increase the economics. And what are your thoughts around that? And how are you guys viewing that?
It does seem as if there's a very positive trend, and that's great. We are very appreciative of it, and we don't take the opportunities for granted. We do appreciate the opportunity to work with the larger bulge bracket banks as well. I believe that there has been a movement on the bank side to be more inclusive as partners in the syndicate. So I think that is a positive. I do agree with you because the numbers, as they say, don't lie, that the percentages can oftentimes be incredibly small, and they can be spread across 10, 12, 15 different banks in some cases, and typically at least 3, 4, or 5. What I think all of us on this panel would like to get to, and that's what I was trying to say in the previous question, if we want to get away from describing what our firms look like, who our firms are owned by, who our employees are, and really get to what are our capabilities. How can we be helpful in the process? Because not all investment banks are created equally, and not all diverse investment banks are created equally. And you can get even more specific, not all veteran-owned firms are the same, and not all African-American-owned firms are the same. We really want to get to a point where we're measured on our capabilities and how can we be helpful in the process for an IPO, a secondary offering, a bond issuance. At Loop Capital, we've invested very heavily in research. We think that it is core to how we can add value to an issuer going forward. We now have a 20-person research team, which is up from 0 when I joined the firm in 2016. We now have 20 research analysts, or a 20-person team, I should say, where we cover about 225 stocks, as I said, across TMT, consumer, and industrials. And it's through that research that we can truly add value to the issuer as they're preparing to go public. We can serve a role of investor education during the IPO process. And then after the IPO, we can help to introduce the company to new investors that didn't participate in the IPO. We can reintroduce them to those that did participate. And sometimes the IPO does not go as planned, and we've all experienced that. The transaction doesn't perform in the aftermarket the way that we expected. A small firm like Loop Capital can be there throughout the process, and when the larger banks may not be, when it's not as important to them at that point, it can be important to us. So we can serve through the research process by covering the company. We can offer non-deal roadshows. So again, we want to be measured on what we can add to the process. So I know it probably went for 2 minutes.
I think you really hit some great points. Jante, jump in, and if you can be additive to that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I'll try to be brief as well, as you mentioned. So to just put the numbers there, and their third-party numbers, S&P Global Intelligence quoted in July that from 2016 to the first half of 2020, on average, the fee pool for the quote diversity broker dealer population was less than 1%, specifically 0.7%. And I think to Michael's point, there is a trend of improvement, but it feels like that trend needs to increase very quickly. And to Michael's point as well, there's capabilities there. So, across all the firms on this call, plus others that can help. And whether I would add as well, and then close, Drexel Hamilton, and I know this is also true for others, we are actively supporting the distribution of stock, bonds, et cetera, to those tier 2 and tier 3, quote, sometimes retail populations. And without us, folks have to know that, that distribution doesn't necessarily happen as efficiently, and we do serve a purpose.
And that tier 2 for tier 3 distribution is very important to the ecosystem of seeing that we get shares into the hands of underserved investors. And it's all about, closing that that huge wealth gap, narrowing that gap, and also being true to what the capital markets are and public offerings are, which is really having the public be able to participate. So thank you for that point. Larry.
Sure. I'll make a couple quick points. One, kind of reiterating points that were already made. I do think we are seeing progress in that there is more, or has been in recent times, more participation by diverse firms in the capital markets. Part of it's in the debt markets is just a lot more deals, and so there are more fees to pay people. In the equity markets is more recently more deals, and given the recent social kind of political situation, it's become more in vogue. Hopefully it's a trend and not just a phenomenon of kind of recent times. But one of the things that Michael made this point, if we want to invest, we need to make enough money to and generate enough fees so we can invest in our business to become better service providers. So when we're all working from home, we need top-notch technology. We need to invest in technology. Paige's point, we need to invest in compliance and compliance officers. And if we want to really be supportive in a broader way of our clients, we need to invest in commercial paper operations or research and so on and so forth. So it's not just so important, it's not just participating in transactions because markets ebb and flow and volumes ebb and flow. It's being able to generate enough fees that we can put back into the business and become that much more valuable and that much stronger. The other issue is, you know, as the diversity firms grow and as that ecosystem becomes more mature, there's no reason a client can't use us differently even in a syndicate. You know, if Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and Piper Jaffray are all fighting to be in a deal, they don't all get the same economics. The client makes judgments about their relative value. So in a particular transaction, it doesn't necessarily mean that a client's best bet is to include 10 diverse firms and we're all, you know, 0.15%.
Yeah.
They can tier the diverse firms based, again, on value added, length of service, and so on. I think that makes for a healthier, healthier capital markets system among the diverse firms. I'll make one last point about the distribution.
It makes it authentic. It makes it authentic, Larry. Based
authentic,
upon
and it indicates a thoughtfulness that went into the process. The other thing I'll mention is, you know, when I worked at Goldman Sachs, I worked on a syndicate desk during part of my career, and it was really at the early stages of you know, diverse firms. It was back when there was firms called Blaylock and Utendahl, and Williams were probably the largest firms at the time. But when they were in a deal and they were focused on smaller investors and incremental investors, on the syndicate desk, we made sure it was a little bit of a peer pressure on us to make sure our system was focused on medium and small investors. So it kind of benefited the issuer from both sides. It's very easy at large firms, particularly given the consolidation of the investing community, to focus on, you know, the top 10 firms on every deal, because these top 10 firms, particularly in the debt markets, can pretty much drive any deal. So I think the participation of firms like ours with that mandate is a much healthier, makes for a much healthier distribution and capital raising exercise.
Thank you, Larry. I want to close with one final point, and really just a quick, you know, thought from each of you on it. We've recently, through the Diversity Broker Dealer Coalition, received calls from issuers and from underwriters who are concerned certain firms in the diversity space are representing themselves as having dual certification, being women-owned and veteran-owned, or being African-American owned and veteran-owned, or Hispanic and veteran, or women and African-American. And there's creating a lot of confusion with some of the issuers and some of the underwriters who are asking us, what is the authenticity of these firms? And how do we figure that out? Like, what are they really? We want to make sure we're working with the right firms that are in the right segment. And there is a potential that trying to wear multiple hats and taking a 23andMe test and adding more and more check boxes to your certification could actually undermine the credibility of this diversity space. And I'm quickly, literally less than a minute for each of you, and then going to close out with Paige. So jumping over to Michael first on that.
I think it goes back to our points around the RFI. I think it's incredibly important that we don't dilute the process or violate the spirit of the diversity. But I will continue to reiterate that we're not all created in, we're not all the same, and we shouldn't be all put in the same bucket just because we're diverse. Tigris has different capabilities than Ramirez. Loop has different capabilities than Drexel. I would challenge the issuers to truly get to know each individual firm and understand what we're good at what differentiates us, because I think what differentiates us is going to be our capabilities, not whether or not we're women-owned or Hispanic-owned or African-American-owned.
Thank you, Michael. Great point. Shante.
Michael, well said. I would add that from a Drexel Hamilton perspective, when we are in a deal, when we are when we add value, those revenues go back to hiring diversity into the financial services space. I would like to hire someone who looks like me. I'm Black. I'm also a veteran. I would like to hire someone with more hair than me. Let's add gender diversity. And so I think, you know, when you think about authenticity, and Michael touched on this, when you get to know us, you will find out what we are doing with our platforms and how we're seeking to grow and where we're really adding value and really giving back.
Thank you, Shante. Larry.
Well, I took a 23andMe test, so I could attest I am not a minority and I'm not a veteran. So, but, you know, I think it's a balance. I think on one hand, to the extent that certain issuers are specifically looking for representation from different groups in their transactions or in their relationships, then that's an issue. But as the, again, as a kind of to Michael's point, as these relationships mature, maybe it should, and as they get to know us, if you're a woman and you're African American, you know, so be it. It's really based on, you know, what you have to offer to the client and what services you provide. So I kind of see both, you know, both sides of the argument. In our case, I can attest that the Ramirez family is 90% owners, and they are 100, and they're Puerto Rican. So I don't think we've faced that issue as far as I know.
Thank you, Larry. And Paige, closing out with you. Your thoughts around that?
So I'm going to jump back 1 second to the economics conversation, and I want to say the economics need to be fair, and they are not fair. I can say that because right at this point in time, I do not own a minority-owned, a woman-owned firm. I have in the past. My women in my family founded the first muni public finance company ever on Wall Street, and so back in the 80s. So at that point in time, it was about checking off a box, honestly, and we were trying to prove credibility. But in reality, a lot of issuers just simply needed us in the deal, and we're happy to send a little bit of money. I think that allocations are very difficult to get for diversity-owned firms, and that needs to change, because we don't just want the checks anymore. Diversity-owned firms don't just want the checks. They want to show up, they want to put orders in, and they want to be filled on those orders so that their clientele can receive those securities. Equities, debt, doesn't matter. So the economics need to come up to speed and need to mirror the stakeholders. And this cannot be inclusion statements that are actually not inclusive. So I feel very strongly about that. Wanted to just get that in there. And then I would also say that you brought me a situation that was going to really harm diversity-owned firms with the underwriting letter, the big boy letter. FINRA had changed the rule.
FINRA, I brought it to FINRA.
Yep. And FINRA had changed something that one part of FINRA knew about and another part didn't, but it was going to just wipe out the diversity-owned firms on the IPO scene. And I had no idea about it. You brought it to me, and within 4 weeks, we were able to get it changed. So I would just say to anybody listening out there, any of the diverse firms who are listening, please tell us what your challenges are. What is inhibiting your growth, your success? If I know about them, I will fight for you. I will fight to change what I can and advocate on the halls of Congress and also with the regulators. So Cynthia's been a terrific advocate for everybody in the space. And there are others of us who can help get things changed.
Thank you, Paige.
I'm not always.
You're welcome.
Yes, Paige. I'm not. By the way, Paige, I'm not always popular with the regulators because I do what's right, not what's popular.
Yeah, me neither. But, you know, I can sleep at night. I can sleep at night fighting the good fight.
I realized if I didn't take that on, the repercussions would literally ripple through the entire diversity space and would have a catastrophic input on from the largest to the smallest firms. So I'm glad we were able to remedy that. And offline, guys, we can tell you what that was all about, and we were able to take corrective action. Thank you, Paige. In closing, I want to thank each of you tonight. Michael Jackson from Loop Capital, Jante Harwell, Drexel Hamilton, Larry Goldman from Samuel Ramirez and Company, and Paige Pierce, our small firms representative with FINRA and President and CEO of McLaughlin Ryder. On behalf of Reverend Jesse Jackson and Pastor Brian and all of those good folks that made Push Tech 2020 happen, thank you for joining us. And thank you to the tech community for welcoming diversity broker-dealers as part of your capital markets transaction. We are committed to delivering quantifiable value to you as strategic diversity partners. Thank you and good evening.
Hi, I'm Chris Broussard, NBA analyst and sports broadcaster, and I want to encourage you to get out there and vote. As you all know, this is an important election, a critical election for our nation. So make sure your voice is heard. If you felt powerless in the past, this is your time to have an impact. If you've never voted before, this is your time to start voting. Vote not only nationally, but locally. This is not just about the president, although obviously that's important. This is also about local elections. So make your voice heard. Go ahead and vote in the 2020 elections.
I'm Todd Yeary, Senior Vice President of the Rainbow Push Coalition and Citizenship Education Fund. Thank you for being a part of our Push Tech 2020 virtual summit, Vision, Voice, and Votes Matter. The coronavirus pandemic has created a public health crisis globally of epic proportions. How we manage our day-to-day lives and how we continue to conduct business has been altered as a result. However, our obligation to continue to push for equity, inclusion, and innovation has not changed. That's why I, on behalf of our founder and president, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., and the entire Rainbow Push family, want to acknowledge our sponsors who have partnered with us to convene this critically important summit and advance this ever important work. Our innovator level sponsors are Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Drexel Hamilton, MFR Securities, and Tigris Financial Partners. Our Sterling level sponsors are Pixar, Intel, Blaylock Van LLC, Ramirez and Company, and CL King and Associates. Our bronze level sponsors are Salesforce and Apple, and our diamond level sponsors are Facebook and Airbnb. Special thanks to our premier sponsor for PushTech 2020, Comcast. Without all of you, our sponsors, these important conversations might not be possible. Because of your support and partnership, our collaborative work of advancing economic justice and inclusion in the tech sector will continue. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors, and thanks to all of you for being a part of PushTech 2020. And remember, keep hope alive.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our sponsors, to all of our partners, to all of the companies, to Rainbow Push headquarters, to all the people involved in doing what we do on an ongoing basis. Even though I have the privilege of leading the Silicon Valley Bay Area office, standing on the great shoulders of Mr. Butch Wing, it is just amazing to see all of the various pieces that make up this ecosystem of change. And so we're grateful to all of you, just for being a part of this experience tonight. And guess what? We got more to go tomorrow. It's going to be phenomenal tomorrow. We have so many speakers to join us, so many more panels, so many more conversations tomorrow. And even as we end tomorrow's experience, we're going to make sure that we have our young people, our young adults, our millennials are going to join us in a very special Friday Night Live tomorrow. So even though we have the day session for everybody, the evening we're going to go hip hop TV style and make sure our young people can get involved. So make sure you register, young folks, millennials. If you have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-grandchildren, register them for tomorrow night. It's going to be hot. It's sponsored by Facebook and Pixar. We're going to have giveaways for the young people. You want to make sure they experience all of that. And let me also tell you that, as I mentioned Butch, you know, all this is happening because Butch has been a part of this for so long with Reverend Jackson, 36 years alongside Reverend Jackson, 21 years alongside him in Silicon Valley, 5 years we've been doing Push Tech together. And as he rides into the sunset and he takes on his new hat as G-Pop, we're going to honor Butch Wing tomorrow during our experience. And so don't miss it. It's going to be hot. It's going to be live. It's going to be awesome. Friday is going to be fantastic. We're going to begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific. You know, this is Silicon Valley based, so it's 9 a.m. Pacific. 12 noon for y'all on the East Coast. That's when we're going to start tomorrow. But we're going to close out tonight with one of the most phenomenal speakers that God has ever created, who is a part of the Rainbow family. And he continues to make such an impact in so many different areas and so many different silos that God has opened up for him to use his voice and his vote. And so we're going to close out tonight with the awesome Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes of the Friendship West Church in Dallas, Texas. But we want you to join us first thing tomorrow. We'll see you again. Keep hope alive.
Kendrick Lamar says, for generations, we've been dealt bad hands with bad plans. And of course, that is a reflection of either a card game or dominoes when someone receives a bad hand. But Kendrick Lamar didn't just stop there with a bad hand. There are bad plans, which speaks of, watch this, an intent to oppress, an intent to repress, an intent to ensure that there is an apartheid of disadvantage for those who are marginalized. And of course, this has been especially expressed in this century in the field of technology. Yeah, for generations, we've been built bad hands with bad plans. Bad hands means that basically there's no way that we should win the game, let alone be in the game. A bad plan reflects a structure that is diabolically designed for our disadvantage. For generations, we've been dealt bad hands with bad plans, but it's so good to know. And I greet you, Pastor Joseph Bryan, and salute you for your leadership. And I especially thank God for how Reverend Jesse Jackson, in his vision, tapped you to give leadership there in Silicon Valley so that we could bring to pass the vision of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., and that is equality, even in the tech industry, so that the bad hand that we had been dealt with can be replaced by a good hand of equality of opportunity. So I salute you, Reverend Jesse Jackson, for always being on the cutting edge, always looking out front ahead to help us to open the door to new eras of possibility as we make this country what it claims it endeavors to be, and that is a more perfect union. All of us know that a part of the bad hands and bad plans that we have been dealt has to do with what I like to call tech apartheid. I would call it a tech desert, but a desert is a natural phenomenon. Apartheid refers to something that has been man-made. It has been created with intentionality to advantage those who are already advantaged and to disadvantage those who are already disadvantaged. And yet here is what Rainbow Push is doing in Silicon Valley. Rainbow Push is uniting in a holy wedlock theology with technology. There is a relationship between faith and what happens on the keyboard of your computer. And as a consequence, we are ensuring through Rainbow Push that hotspots can be had for our children who find themselves going to school now in the age of COVID-19, but because of COVID-19, they find themselves in a tech desert, unable to access Wi-Fi. And yet, because of Rainbow Push and the vision of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., we are balancing the playing field. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, for doing that. So we commemorate 5 years of fighting the bad hands and the bad plans. We commemorate 5 years of waging war against tech apartheid. We commemorate 5 years of opening the door to a new era of possibilities in technology as we inform our technology with our liberating theology. But then I especially want to say thank you, because this has also been a vehicle whereby our churches can embrace technology and then use technology to do what Jesus said. He told us to go into all the world. And here we are in the age of COVID-19, where we have been forced to go into virtual spaces, but those virtual spaces have taken us, have propelled us into all the world. And it's because of the efforts of Rainbow Push that many churches now are wired for technology, not just for ministry and worship, but also for service to the community. And so churches like Friendship West here in Dallas, churches around the country are able to bring children to the church house and there have a tech center. And at that tech center, the children can find themselves coding, learning how to code and utilizing their skills that they may be ready to run the race in this present age. And so thank you, Reverend Jackson. Thank you, Reverend Joseph Bryant, for your leadership. Yeah, we've been dealt bad hands with bad plans, but here's the good news. We have another hand, and that hand has been given to us by the hand of Almighty God. And God's hand, as a consequence, has allowed us to play a winning hand. And so thank you for giving us that winning hand. We're going to play that winning hand until justice rolls down as waters and righteousness as an ever-flowing stream. We're going to play that winning hand because it's our responsibility to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. We're going to play our winning hand because when we play our winning hand, America is truly America, and it becomes one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I got my hand. I'm about to play my hand. You've got your hand. Rainbow Push, thank you for giving us a winning hand, and our winning hand is in the hand of our great God, because we understand what it's like to marry, to unite in holy wedlock, theology and technology. And through theology and technology, we are able to give birth to a brand new sociology. And when we have a brand new sociology, this country will become what it should become, and we'll make of this old world a new world. Let's do that through Rainbow Push. We thank you. We praise God for you. And now we look forward to November 3rd. And in looking forward to November 3rd, we're going to vote. I hope and pray you won't wait till November 3rd to vote. If you can vote early, please vote early. Vote early. Do not wait until November 3rd. But if November 3rd comes and you have yet to vote, don't let that day pass without voting. Go ahead and vote and express your voice and your vision for what America should and could be. And when we do that, indeed, America will be America. And when America is America, America will no longer be the disunited States of America, but truly the United States of America. But it can only happen when all of us exercise our voice, cast our vision by casting our vote. Vote November 3rd and hopefully before.